August 3rd.
Mayor, you're muted.
Oh, excuse me.
I didn't see that either. Oh, so.
Thank you. I'll call the August 3rd, 2020 regular Town of Lyons Board of Trustees meeting to order. We have the roll call, Madam Clerk.
Yes, Mayor Angelo,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Present.
Trustee Caravas,
Present.
Trustee Lowell,
Present.
Trustee Miller,
Present.
Trustee Waugh, and Trustee Rogan.
Present.
Please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
And justice for all.
This is our time to observe a reflective moment of silence. Thank you. Number 3, approve the agenda. Are there any requests to amend the agenda? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as listed. I'll call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Aye.
and Trustee Rogan.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. This is an opportunity under audience business for anybody in the audience to address the Board of Trustees on any item that is not on the agenda in regard to an ordinance. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to address the Board of Trustees? Ian Brighton, you are recognized, sir.
Hi, everyone. It's Ian Brighton, 322 Evans. Just wanted to clarify, Mayor Angelo, can I address anything? Did I understand it was only something about an ordinance?
Yes.
You said? Okay, but I can address something different?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, just wanted to clarify. So yeah, I'm speaking on behalf of the sidewalk, speaking in, okay, let me rephrase. We recently had a repaving project on Evans Street, as I'm sure all of you are aware. And 2 of the 3 sidewalks got ADA ramps. However, the sidewalk on the northwest corner of Evans and 3rd did not get an ADA ramp. And this being a federal project, it must comply with ADA regulations, actually more specifically ABA, which is the Architectural Barriers Act. And this project cannot introduce a barrier that wasn't there before. The condition was there was a concrete sidewalk that ran about 5 feet before the street and stopped, and then there was a dirt section, but it was level all the way to the street, so you could easily get a wheelchair or a stroller through that. In my case, I always push the stroller. That's how I noticed this. Now there's a curb, and so that condition has changed, and that is a violation of ABA. So this needs to get addressed. This does put the town at risk. And I just wanted to call it to everyone's attention that we need to deal with this situation before a complaint comes in. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to address that to flood recovery administrator Sanders later in the meeting because I have a concern about the AD requirements as well. So that will be addressed later in the meeting. But thank you for bringing it up, sir.
Thank you.
Would anybody else wish to address the Board of Trustees? Keith, please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Keith Roussel, Rousssil. I live at 194 2nd Avenue.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead. So we wanted to talk about the bridge project and specifically as it pertains to our project, as pertains to our property, because that was discussed in the last Board of Trustees meeting, which we were unable to attend. Couple of things. One, most importantly, we want to be super clear that we really want the bridge project to happen too. We think that's really important for the town, and absolutely it needs to happen. It seemed like from watching the last meeting, the options were to either condemn our property or not do the bridge project, which we're hopeful that there can be some other options. We're willing to negotiate that. One of the Board of Trustees brought up putting the account into, putting in an escrow account, which we would be fully in favor of. We think that's the best option from our perspective anyway. So we would like to talk about that. We sent an email asking about that, and we didn't get any response. So we would just like to, if you plan to condemn our property, we'd like that you would just talk to us in some way before you do that. Because we don't think that's the best or most cost-efficient option for everyone. We're concerned for a lot of reasons. This does affect our property pretty, well, potentially minimally, which is what we would want and presumably what you want. We were a little worried after seeing what happened at 207 2nd Avenue. That's the first property that we know of that's been impacted by this. The crew that was hired to go in and do tree work there, frankly, didn't seem to do a very good job. They really took out a lot of trees, which was concerning to us. And they frankly left the place a mess. I happened to run into Brian Baer this morning down by the river, and he was appalled at the state that a tree crew would leave that in. And he does that stuff for a living. So that made us very concerned that the project could leave our property in that sort of disarray. This is one of those things, the plan is just to do a little bit of grading on our property, and a portion of our property will just be graded down. I think they said 2 feet. As someone who's done a tiny bit of amateur excavation work, I know that sometimes when you're going to get something down to 2 feet, you go to 3 feet and then you backfill it. If that happens with this particular property, that's going to kill 3 very, very large, very, very old willow trees that are very important to us. And we would just prefer that there be some assurance that that won't happen, or a plan if that doesn't happen. Regardless of how you value a tree like that, there's a lot of concerns, but one of the big concerns for us is that if those trees were to die, they overhang the river. And so that would pose an immediate risk to the health and safety of anyone in the river. And there are trees, so we would be responsible for that. And that could cost a lot of money, approximately $9,000, again, according to Brian Baer, to have those trees removed. Obviously, we do not want that to happen. We want those trees to stay there and be healthy. But in what we've seen thus far from communication, there's not really any assurance of that. The closest thing we got to an assurance was the town lawyer said that there was an option that we could sue the town if there was damage to the trees, which we think is a really bad option. that's not, certainly, we don't want to be in a fight with town. We don't want to sue anybody ever, would be our goal. So we would like to hear your thoughts on that. And we would just like some sort of dialogue on what's going on. And really, we'd encourage you not to condemn the property, and we'd like to try and work out some other solution. That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. We do not comment normally under audience business, but I would like the town administrator and Ms. Sanders to address your concerns further. As an action item, perhaps we'll put that on the agenda later this evening. Would anybody else wish to address the Board of Trustees at this time? Madam Clerk, do you see anybody that I don't see?
No, sir, but I did receive a letter that was delivered. They would like me to read in from a resident.
Please do.
All right. Dear Lions Board of Trustees, after listening to one of the memorials for John Lewis, Ron Elving, CPR, public radio producer, said, every town in this country should have a John Lewis Bridge. Of course, my first thought was, wow, great idea. We should do this here in Lyons. John Lewis has always been a peaceful equal rights activist. I've been thinking about equal rights since the original Selma March. I have followed his life's work and I greatly admired him and what he stood for. After thinking about it for a couple of days, I called Mayor Nick Angelo and introduced myself and shared this idea with him. As I recall, his reaction was, we should implement this, which was a very encouraging response. With this letter, I hope to inspire the board to consider this endeavor. Bridge names a friend and I kicked around. John Lewis Bridge Project, John Lewis's Good Trouble Bridge, Looking for Good Trouble. Signed sincerely, Betsy Monteith, P.O. Box 1076, Lyons, Colorado.
Thank
No.
you.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else wish to address the Board of Trustees? Seeing none, we'll move on to Boulder County Sheriff's Report. Sergeant Bill Chris, sir.
Good evening. I have a short report tonight. There's not a lot happening. I do want to address a little bit of information from our staff at the Boulder County Sheriff's Office. Due to some promotions and some folks leaving the department for various reasons, in a very short time, next 3 weeks, we're going to hit a 30% decrease in our staffing. We are in the midst of reformulating some of our district boundaries, and more than likely we will back to the old system that we used to have, where the county was divided up into 6 separate districts. Currently, it's divided up into 3 districts: the mountains, north, and south. We also have dedicated folks in Lyons per the contracts and in the town of Superior. The Lyons contract for the sheriff's office does indicate that the officer assigned there during the day spends the majority of the time in town and then can go out into the county to service whatever the needs are of the surrounding community of Lyons in the northern part of the county. So we will more than likely go back to that model, and that our district, our Lyons assigned deputies will be taking on a little bit more responsibility outside the town. So this is a model that we have been with pretty much forever prior to us a couple of years ago moving to the north-south district. So I just want everybody to be aware of that, just based on some of our staffing issues that's going on at the sheriff's office. Other than that, everything else in town seems to be doing well. We hit the second weekend of the parks and river closures. Everyone's been adhering to it pretty well. We still get visitors ramping up a little bit at the Black Bear Hole, but as I indicated, I think a couple weeks ago or the last board meeting, that if we're able to decrease the hundreds of people that are there at the Black Bear Hole down to under 12, that's a move in the right direction. And we surely have done that. We have gone in on the weekends on a couple different occasions when crowds have exceeded more than like 15 folks, and people were starting to congregate, and politely asked them to move along, and everyone has been in full compliance. So the parks and the river basin and Black Bear Hole all are doing well. And that's all I have at this time.
Are there any questions for Sergeant Christ? Seeing none, sir, please be safe.
Thanks, sir.
Trustee reports. Trustee Rogan.
Thanks. My report is going to be short tonight. So the mayor and I were on a, a roundtable with Rebecca Major from the Hour Center and Chris Campbell from the County Health Department and a number of other people. And some good news coming out of there is that there's going to be mobile COVID testing coming up here. And it's being determined right now exactly who's going to be eligible for the testing, but that would include Lyons, Allens Park, and Netherland and the surrounding areas, which is great because there are a number of people who can't get down to get tested. And those mobile units also can be used for flu vaccinations. And then they're trying to figure out now how to use them for COVID vaccinations as well when that's available. So I think that's promising news that they're planning for a COVID vaccine and how to distribute it. Also, I communicated with Chris about the potential for testing our municipal wastewater for COVID. It sounds kind of funny, but in different communities around the country, it's been proven that when you can see COVID in wastewater, that gives you a 2-week lead time to get people tested in advance of an outbreak. And so Chris told me that they're doing this, they're investigating this in Larimer County right now, and he's going to see how it can be extended to Boulder County. And that's all I got.
Excellent report. Thank you. Trustee Lowell.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Angelo. I took some time and I have been putting together the outline and a notional idea for the annual town report. I think all of you know how ardent I am about establishing this report as a staple of our town government. It's basically a compendium of the town government for the year. In this case, it would be the year 2020. Includes financial data, reports of the mayor, town administrator, directors, boards and commissions, districts like the library and fire, and even some important community organizations like LEAF and the Lions Community Foundation. It's my hope that this report and others that will follow will eventually become a part of the rhythm of this town's government. But I need to do a number of things before this becomes reality. One thing I'd like to do is I need to bring it before the board for your concurrence and acceptance of the idea at some point. Likely, as I look at a notional schedule, I'm thinking probably mid-October. But first, before I do that, I need to have some discussions with Town Administrator Simonson, Finance Director Johnson, people like Kim Mitchell, who I understand has been looking at other towns' reports, so that these are some of the people who will be contributing to it, and especially people like Kim and perhaps Ariel will be helping to put the thing together. Following that, and following the concurrence of the board, I'd actually like to start work on this in October with the goal of publishing it in whatever form we think is most effective and economical, probably in late January, when we have as much of the financial data as possible that we can put into that report. So look for that coming to a theater near you soon. The other question I have, and this is probably for Director Cosgrove, it came to my attention, I guess I hadn't realized it, that the labyrinth is actually on town property. I don't know what made me think that the labyrinth was in the CDOT right of way, but it turns out it's part of the Martin parcel. I guess my only question is, what's our policy on the labyrinth? Not that there's been any issues, nothing I've heard of, But I'm just curious about, are we treating this?
What are the other neighbors?
Are we treating it as open space? And, in general, how does it fit into the, to our portfolio of parks and open space? That's all I have.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
This will also be a very short report. Two things real quickly, one town business and one not really, but something I wanted to say. The town business, I would remind the board that at the last meeting, the possibility was discussed of forming a citizens budget committee that would be a temporary committee, short-term service, no multi-year commitment required. And we've had an email inquiry or two from a citizen who was interested. I've been trying to recruit a couple of people. One of them I got a maybe on. I haven't started twisting her arm yet, but I may. But just to remind the board that if you know somebody who, particularly those who have financial background or board service background in other organizations, you might mention to them that this is being considered and direct them to contact Finance Director Johnson, because I think it was a really good idea. But it's like most things, it'll probably take some persuading to make it happen. And then secondly, not necessarily town board related, but community related certainly. The Lions Club of Lions had its annual charity golf tournament today, and it was probably the most successful one in recent memory. Some of the guys in the Lions Club have been there, and the women now too, have been there quite a while, and this is the most they can remember raising, and that money goes for scholarships for Lions High School students, and it goes for eye care and eyeglasses for those who need assistance in that for the town and other Lions Club projects. And I'd like to thank Trustee Lowell and every other golfer who participated, and in particular, all of the town businesses that help sponsor that event, because this is a tough time for some town businesses to step forward and sponsor things, but so many of them did that it was gratifying, and it made the tournament very successful, and it will produce benefits to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Trustee Miller?
I don't have anything tonight.
Okay. Trustee Careless?
Doing that? Caught me off guard, Wendy. I wasn't prepared for that. I've got a question for staff. Considering one of the executive session items we have concerning 435 Park Street, another property in town, 401 2nd Avenue, is on the corner there in the south west corner. Has been sitting there for 7 years now after the flood. Had multiple opportunities for free assistance from volunteer groups. Came in and out of town to help. As that house continues to sit there, and we're having the issue with permits and health safety issues. We have our code compliance people. I'd like to have that house looked at as soon as possible and brought to code compliance, because I know as a Lions volunteer from working on that home, that deck, most of those deck joists are completely rotted out. So if any kids were to climb up there, it's going to collapse. And there's an open pit below that deck that's a lower door to a basement full of concrete. It could be a bad thing. So I would like to see something done with that, so we don't get into a long, drawn out process like we're going to deal with later this evening. Lions Volunteers, as most of you know, is no longer a separate standing 501c3. We've been merged in with Leaf. And last week, they collected 2 cubic yards of styrofoam, 500 pounds of metal throughout town, the local area, and got it into a folder at the Equicycle Center. They worked with the high school football team Wednesday, Coach Answer and his kids. Did some polyurethane sealer to wooden sculptures in the archways at Bone Park. The Weed Posse continues to do its work, and other volunteer work at the Botanic Garden to help fix some vandalism there. So thank you for all those people helping, especially the football team. Let's see, the UEB will be meeting Wednesday in 2 days, 4:30 p.m. to 6:30. The 95% design for the High Street drainage is out, so if you want to take a look at that, it should be part of the agenda, I do believe. Let's see. I also would like to ask staff, and probably it'd be Jill providing this. So the board has, as we continue to get requests by certain members of the chamber, couple businesses wanting grants and nothing, not necessarily loans. I'd be interested to have a list of the USDA recipients since the beginning of that program in town. All the individual businesses that received a grant. I don't need dollar amounts. I'm just curious who's received them, how many we have out there. If someone has 1, 2, or 3, let us know that, and let us know if those have defaulted. The board has an eye on that since we're being asked to give up the townspeople's some of the care monies just to give to a couple of the businesses in town as grants with no loans tied to that. I'd like to see all that, please. And I think the board needs to see that. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. I spent a lot of time reviewing the Code of Ethics. I think that we can communicate with one another in a more civil manner. I have never used the gavel in 2 terms, and I don't want to ever use it. And I don't want to ever use it on a fellow trustee. I know that tensions are running high. I know that it's a very difficult format in which to try to communicate. But I would just like every trustee to take another look and read the ethics code. It's an ordinance. So basically, it's the guiding principle by law on our behavior. And so I think it's an incredibly important document. And I think that we should all refresh ourselves and pursue communication and relationships that are hard because of this format that would be much easier if we were sitting on the dais together, to just give each other just a little more consideration. I think that's really important. Other than that, it is my pleasure to appoint Rachel Nelson to the Lions Historic Preservation Commission. And I believe that we're getting close to enough members to be able to apply for some grant funds. And let me just put the word out to the public that there are a couple of more positions available on that particular commission. And I think that it's important.
Mayor Angelo?
Yes.
Real quick, I received an email from Trustee Waugh just a little bit ago that
Yes.
he just got back. He wouldn't be in, but he wanted me to give a brief report for him. He said
Go
the
ahead.
commission is holding a second round of interviews with potential firms related to the comp plan. Those will occur this week. And a representative of several downtown businesses contacted him about revenue impacts related to the closure of parks. Downtown business and potentially others have seen a financial impact. The chamber did a survey and will provide more information. And that's all he said.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Leaf agenda request. Staff.
Actually, we had an agenda request from the executive director of LEAF, Lori Barton. I don't know if she's on the phone. I did reach out to her to remind her we were meeting tonight, but I have not heard back. So I don't know if there's someone else on the phone that is representing LEAF tonight.
I spoke with interim, the interim fire chief. The fire department was used for the Golden Gang for a long time. They did a full kitchen. And I asked him if they would be open to perhaps providing space for LEAF. He said to have the LEAF director call him and to see if perhaps they could come up with an agreement. So if you could facilitate that, Madam Administrator,
Sure.
I appreciate that. Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
Yeah, since Ms. Barton apparently isn't able to be here, just for the board's information, I had a conversation with her about this, I don't know, a month, 6 weeks ago or so, when I was volunteering at the food pantry, actually. And what Leaf is kind of looking at long term is they think that they need to find more space. The demands on their services have increased. They've always leased space from the Lions Community Church. And during the COVID time, when the church is not having events there, the space is pretty well. But eventually, when we get past COVID and the church needs some of its space back, Lee feels like they just don't have enough. And they're looking at places around town. And as people have discovered for other purposes in Lions, there's not a whole lot available. They inquired of the town. I think they wanted to inquire of the town, did the town have any surplus space? What are the town's long-term plans for the depot building, for example, that the town is using quite a bit right now? And I wasn't able to suggest any space that the town wasn't using, but that's the nature of the inquiry, is that Leaf services have grown, and they'd like to find a more permanent home, but they don't have a big endowment or reserve funds. And that's kind of the nature of what the inquiry was. And so just, I guess, if any trustees hear of anything like potentially fire department space or some space in town that may be vacant for a while, Leaf would be interested. They looked into acquiring a couple of vacant parcels of businesses that closed down, but the costs were beyond their means. But that's the nature of what they wanted to present to the board, I believe.
Excellent. Okay. Flood recovery update. Staff?
Evening, everybody. I'm not going to read the report, and I'll just take any questions that anybody has. We have quite a few projects wrapping up, and we've got a few projects getting started. I can address the questions that came up earlier if you would like. How would you like to start?
I would like you to address the ADA curbs, because I was going to bring that up, Tracy. If you could do that, that would be great.
Okay. This really was based off the guidance of our engineer that we weren't required to put in ADA ramps at the corners where the curb is going in, because we're not putting in sidewalk. We're not tying into ADA acceptable sidewalks. But I did try to reach out to him earlier today to just get a clarification on that. And he wasn't available. The ADA is something that Ian did forward some information I've been reviewing. So we'll go over all this with our engineer, and we can come back with a report or an option regarding these ramps at the corners of these streets. But really, this was a paving and curb and gutter project. There's no funding for the sidewalks because this is flood recovery, but a lot of the existing sidewalks are not compliant. And so I don't know if we're required or if it's responsible to tie into non-compliant access points. Because some areas it's just dirt, some areas you've got very narrow sidewalks, you've got wide sidewalks, you've got uneven flagstone, which also is dangerous. So I think there's an overall project that probably the town needs to possibly pursue or put, on their list of priorities. But I will be happy to do a little more research regarding this funding for this project.
Okay, my concern was that if federal funds were used, why couldn't we have put in the ADA compliant corner curbs, preparing for the future? Because if we have to do it after the fact, it's going to be very expensive. That was my concern. So because I asked you this question a few meetings ago, and you said basically the same thing that you just said, which I understand. But then thinking, you know, which sometimes I wish I didn't think, I said that it's a federal program. They require ADA corners. Why aren't we at least putting in the corners, preparing for the future instead of having to come up with the expense to do them in the future? So if you could get some kind of clarification for us on that, I'd certainly appreciate it.
Okay, I will do that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I can address the Keith Roussel's concerns about that property. We did do some temporary relocation of the utility lines so that the contractor can come in and demo the bridge. All that work was done on town property. That was not on private property. And I had met with the contractor about cleaning up that area. I have not revisited to see if he completed that, so I can go out there and take a look. But it wasn't, I would admit it's not the prettiest of jobs because it's all they're gonna come in and tear all that out anyway. It's just a temporary relocation and so that we can get in there, but there's gonna be more vegetation coming out and all that is on town property.
Trustee Miller?
Do you want to have Tracy talk to or discuss the Russell thing now? I mean, Mr. Russell's still on from public speaking, waiting to, because you said you were going to address him. So I'm just reminding you that he's here. I didn't know if Attorney Dittman had anything to say about it, because the escrow thing was brought up by me a couple meetings ago, or whenever we discussed that last meeting, I guess it was, about why couldn't we just put some money in escrow for them. And I think Attorney Dittman answered that question. Am I remembering right?
Yeah, I'll address a few of the concerns if that's the board's desire at this point, concerning this property and kind of the restrictions the town has on basically creating future promises to replace stuff and trees in this case. So under the Colorado Constitution, you know, we are prohibited from binding the actions of a future board of trustees. So the current board of trustees cannot promise that a future board of trustees will do something. That's something that the Colorado Constitution has prescribed for municipalities. Secondly, along the same lines, but under a different provision, the Colorado Constitution called TABOR, you may be familiar with, we cannot guarantee future financial appropriations. So we cannot say that the town will pay money in the future. And so that severely restricts the types of things the town can do with concern to replacing the damaged trees. Of course, in the easement agreement itself, the town promises not to damage those trees and to basically put the property back to the state it was prior to the construction. So that is a contractual obligation the town has and will have to fulfill as part of the easement, temporary construction easement. So there's protection for the homeowners there. But what the town cannot do, unfortunately, because of state law, is to guarantee some sort of financial remuneration if the trees were to be damaged in the future. It's just something the town cannot do constitutionally. So it's not because the town isn't, you know, willing to consider that, it's because we are legally prohibited from doing so. And so, which is why, you know, and I think in discussions about this issue, you know, the town has basically created more assurances that it's not going to damage the trees, and if it does, it's going to do everything it can basically to make the situation right. But we can't promise at this time to, you know, to pay in the future, and then that's the issue when it comes down to it.
Madam Administrator, didn't you relate to me that there had been a work done on this house, that this house had been expanded and perhaps the trees, the possibility of the trees being damaged by the expansion of the house, that there was a possibility that that could have taken place also?
That was actually brought up by one of the trustees. I am not aware that this, because of its location in the floodplain, they should not have expanded the footprint. One of the trustees thought that potentially they had excavated and may have damaged their own tree roots, but I have not confirmed that.
Okay. I knew that issue had come up. Anything further, Tracy?
No, are there any other questions on this project or any others that you would like me to address?
The only thing that I always like for you to relate to the Board of Trustees is if there are any other issues that have come up which would basically cost the town additional funds, and I would like you to always let us know if that's the case.
Yeah, I do, and I will continue to do that. But right now, I think you're aware of any shortfalls that we have at the moment, which is Second Avenue Bridge, and FEMA would like to see what the bids come in at before they make a decision on that. So those bids are due the 12th, and we would like to hopefully do an award on the next board meeting on the 17th.
Good, thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening, Tracy. Thanks for your report as usual. And I believe this will probably have to be more answered by Mr. Simonson, but since she's up next, we both can hear it. Again, you can fight over who wants to answer. The 4th Avenue Ped Bridge, yes, we're 3 years out. But we've been told by staff multiple times when we get a bunch of extra grants, and we filed for the first grant, and we were notified in our meeting July 6th packet that the first grant was denied to us, $53,000. And prior to that, I believe in May, or may have been April, I hinted at, I'd like to see staff give us a timeline or a proposal of when we're going to have grants filed and what list we're going to go for in the timeline for those grants to hopefully total close to $400,000. And we had talked, most of us on this board and staff have talked about a fundraiser in town. I'd like to see when we plan to start doing that, because if I don't see any of that by the time we're getting close to the end of this term, I'll probably start bringing out motions to turn back this grant and forgive and forget about that Ped Bridge, because that $400,000 shortfall, on top of other shortfalls we have coming up that we're all aware of, I don't think the town can float. So I'd like to see a pretty hard proposal, and since it's 3 years out, I would imagine it's probably come sometime spring, late winter, spring, depending on your not so busy time, Victoria. if we can see just a timeline of what we plan to file for when and who's to get this local fundraiser going too, so and hopefully get all that $400,000 there before we even begin construction.
Sure, I'll prepare for our next meeting a timeline, a list of the grants that we're submitting, and when we think we'll hear back on those, okay. And what we have potentially in regard to fundraising. So we'll give you an update at your next meeting.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Flood Recovery Manager Sanders? Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
Yes, on the Second Avenue Bridge, since I understand it's a pretty tight timetable, should condemnation be necessary, I think we've been told it will be necessary for the town to hire condemnation counsel and perhaps an appraiser as well. Are preliminary steps being taken to get a list of potential candidates for those and talk to them about what their availability is? I think that's my question. Are steps being taken if we have to go that route to have it ready to go?
So we have to draft an RFP and publicly post it. We can send that RFP to potential proposers, but we can't really be reaching out to see availability of specific attorneys and appraisers. So I have spoke with Attorney Dittman about starting to draft the RFP for the council, and then we'll have to work on. With the appraiser, we might be able to do quotes. If it's under a certain dollar amount, that's a quicker process and you can reach out directly to some agencies and not have to do the whole bid process of 4 to 6 weeks. So we are taking steps. There's some other steps we have to take regarding URA, and we've been working on that all last week. So we will be sending out some notifications to all the homeowners, which notifies them of their rights, and that's something that we have to do first. So that's in process right now. So we are taking steps towards that process.
Okay, because as Attorney Dittman advised us, that process, once you file it, can go pretty quick. As I understand it, the town can simply tender a sum of money and basically get pretty close to immediate access to the property. But the steps leading up to that, in terms of doing an RFP and everything, may be able, and giving notice to the owners, may take some time. So I just was hoping that that was in the works, because pretty much take it or leave it offers were made to the last 2 holdouts. And if they decide to leave it, then I think the board's direction was pretty clear that let's go forward, because we can't delay the project. So glad to hear that some preliminary investigations are being done into that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Sir, Attorney Dittman has had his hand up for a while.
Attorney Dittman, I apologize, sir. Go ahead.
No worries. That's hard to see everybody sometimes. So I did want to add one more point to the Second Avenue Bridge project piece, specifically concerning condemnation. So there has been a little bit of misconception as to what condemnation means in this instance. A town entering into condemnation would not be for the entire property. It'd only be for the portion of the property we need, and more specifically for a temporary construction easement. And so we'd be condemning that interest in land, not so only a small portion of the property A, and B, a temporary property interest, not a permanent property interest. So in condemnation, you don't have to completely condemn the property as is sometimes thought. You can condemn any interest in land. In this case, it would be a temporary construction easement. So just to clear that up, so we're all talking on the same page.
Thank you, sir. Any further questions? Thank you, Flood Recovery Manager Sanders.
You're welcome.
Town Administrator's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I'll stick in line with everyone and stay very pretty high level tonight. As everyone knows, we had a tree limb pickup that extended over numerous days, as we talked about last time. The final pickup will be tomorrow in Stone Canyon, and so that will be the remainder of probably limb pickup for this year. But it will only be a couple of hours in the morning, so please do not rush out and add more to it. We'd appreciate that. I did want to give just a real quick COVID update. We had a meeting this morning with Boulder County Public Health. Unfortunately, there were 33 new cases reported in Boulder County yesterday. That is the highest we've ever seen. Fortunately, there were no new cases reported in Lyons. So we are maintaining a total of 5 positive cases in Lyons. We want to keep it that way. So we appreciate everyone wearing their masks. We do have a group working on how to reinforce positive mask behavior. And it looks like we're going to have that in place here before the end of the week. We will be surprising people with a local gift card if you're wearing your mask in town to be spent locally. So we're working on that and should be rolling out here as well. The governor did renew the statewide order on Friday. That was due to expire. No major differences in it. We should find out a little bit more tomorrow. We do want to tell people that Boulder Valley School District, which does affect some of our residents, is having a board meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. to determine their final strategy on opening the schools in Boulder Valley School District. So that will have an impact on some folks. Let's see, COVID, that's about it on that for now. One of the questions that the board did ask for a follow-up on was a basic update on Lake McIntosh shares and have we been able to locate any shares to purchase? I have tried numerous times to get in touch with the administrative staff with the reservoir and have not been successful in that. So I've reached out to a couple of the water share brokers. They do have, they are reaching out to some of the shareholders right now, inquiring if there are 7 to 10 additional shares anyone is interested in selling. Their response was unlikely to have that as one solid package of 7 to 10, but more likely will come in 1 and 2 shares at a time. They were able to successfully procure shares for Summit Housing and Tamburello is my understanding. So we do want to let the board know that shares are currently selling for between $10,000 and $10,500 per share. So that's why we're looking at 7 to 10. They did indicate, and I should see if the board has interest in whether or not, he said they do have some shareholders that instead of cash actually prefer like a swap of 1 CBT or 7 shares of McIntosh. And so if the board has any interest in that, that's another alternative he said might bring out some other shareholders. So I know that a couple of the trustees wanted to talk about shares a little further. So I think I'll just leave it there unless you have questions for me on other things going on in town.
Did I understand you to say, Madam Administrator, that they are willing to trade 1 share of CBT for 7 shares of Lake McIntosh?
Yeah, he said they may be able to find people who will do a chunk like that versus otherwise, if we just ask shareholders, he said we'll get people who will do them 1 or 2 at a time, unless you do it as 1 CBT in exchange for blank numbers of shares.
I understand. Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
Yes, I have a number of questions about water shares. The first one is, how does the town have extra CBT shares to trade for Lake McIntosh shares if we're down under the 2 water letters to 0.2 shares above our current requirements in the IGA with Longmont? That's
not accurate.
That's what the letter said.
A letter from Joe Kabbalah?
No, the letter, the town letter to Longmont and the Longmont letter back to the town. They both use the figure 0.2 water shares.
I was actually, this is Director of Utilities Kaplan. And I was looking at that because I noticed how we changed from having a couple of extra shares in the 2018 letter to having not even a full share. And so I wanted to go back and see where we're showing 4 taps last year, but only 2 CBT shares coming in. And that's where I see the discrepancy. Now, the concern was where that might have come from. I didn't think we were including the public works buildings, but if they were, then we would have used those. I don't know if you remember, Dolores, you and I were looking at it, but that was last November, trying to go through where the taps were, who had paid for a tap and who hadn't. We had that listing. I don't have that in my email. I had an initial document that mentioned 2 CBT shares that we gained, and that's what we show. We went up, but we show that there were 4 taps. So I was trying to figure out what the other 2 taps were and why we don't show CBT shares coming in with that. If they were town properties, we would use town shares. But if you look in the 2019 Longmont letter, it shows that we went from 725, 24 point something to 726 point something. So I think we need to look at where that was for last year and what, if that's, I can tell you that's where it changed from having the 2 point something to point something.
Yeah, that was exactly my next question is how did we go down 2 shares? As a bit of history here, and this is going to lead to my next question. When the town of Lyons got from the city of Longmont in November of 2018, the annual letter totaling up the IGA formula, it said that we had a surplus of 2.2 CBT shares above the amount needed under the IGA. Receipt of that letter prompted the UEB, the town engineer, the town administrator, the town attorney, to come to the Board of Trustees and say, we have an emergency. We're down to a 2.2 share surplus, and we have vacant lots in town that are in the process of inquiring about whether they can build on them. And therefore, we may run short of CBT shares. This is an emergency. Please consider amending the ordinance to require a CBT share for any new tap or connection in town. And the board did that. We never could get the 6 votes for an emergency, but over a series of 1 workshop and 3 meetings at the request of the UEB and the town staff specifically, we changed the ordinance by adopting ordinance 1055. So in 2019, November of 2019, the town gets a letter from Longmont and says, you're down to 0.2 shares. If 2.2 shares was an emergency in 2018, why did the Board of Trustees not hear of this being down to 0.2 shares until now, until I asked for this letter? Why was that letter not brought to the Board of Trustees, either the prior board or this board? That's my next question.
And I would say, I believe I knew there was already a concern, and I would want to go back to that meeting and see if even back into February, we didn't already know it was not going to be 2.2. And that was what was pushing for the emergency. But I'd have to try to go through everything. I remember for probably over a year having concerns about that we didn't have even the 2.2. And so it may have been that we were going to be less than 2.2 when the emergency came up to begin with.
Yeah, I guess I was not prepared for a discussion about our water shares tonight. I'd like to ask that we add this as a general business item next time, so staff can, if you want to submit your questions, so we can get those prepared.
Actually, I requested that this be added to the agenda, and it was not put in general business. Instead, it was put in the reports. I don't know why it wasn't put in general business, and I'd love to have that discussion.
Our follow-up just asked about a status update on like Macintosh shares.
No, I requested an agenda item, and it was put under administrator's report. My next question is, in the town of Lyons letter to Longmont, which is 2019 TOL water letter, excuse me. On the first page, there's an underlined line right under a table that says the average and maximum daily water demand for the 2019 water year. And then the next 2 paragraphs talk about average daily water demand for water year 2018 and maximum daily water demand for water year 2018. Are those typos, and should that be 2019?
And that also is one that's gone back through the years. I've talked to Longmont about whether or not we need to make some changes, but that was the first letter that I did last year, taking over. And I brought this up, that there is, the way they word it, they are using the incorrect years. So I can double check. I thought I had actually made changes to the document to update to the current year. We had some discussions with the staff here because I was trying to point out to them, we're talking about a previous year and the wording should be exactly as you say. There should be something. It didn't make sense to me either back in November. And I thought we had that corrected. So that also I can review because I've worked on both of those. And in looking at them now, while we were looking at this meeting, I started to wonder in particular about the shares. But the other one I know about just from working on that letter and bringing it up in the past to Longmont and them saying that was the way it was supposed to be in response to their letters.
Okay.
But I can get a review to you on that.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it. I couldn't tell if that was just a typo or whether
Well,
it
and
was
that-
actually meant to be 2018.
If I may, I think too, Aaron, it's because the water year starts November 1st of 2019 and carries over to October 31st of 2020. So you've got data from 2 years in one water year. So that's why it's a little bit confusing. It's not January 1st through December 31st. It's
Right.
got 2 years in there.
Okay.
So they may be calling the water year at the beginning where we're thinking the year it ends.
Right, that's why we get that annual letter. We have to have it done in October every year because that's the end of the water year.
Okay. I'd appreciate some clarification on that. My next question goes to the first paragraph on the second page that talks about future projections through build out by year 2133. Current water connection pace of 3 taps per year. Since we have maybe 6 vacant lots that may need a water tap left in Lyons, how do we get 3 water taps per year projected through 2133? Are we projecting some annexations or what?
And that one I continued on with what we had been using as the average last year in my part-time capacity.
Okay, that's just picked up from prior. So I would suggest that that probably needs to be relooked at since we're down to about 6 vacant lots in town. We don't have that many left unless we annex someplace. Final question, and then I would like this on a general business item for future agendas. There is a totaling up in here of the 23 taps that were previously unused due to basically flood buyouts. And it references 12 currently unused taps. And so to get from 23 to 12, you subtract 6 habitat taps, 5 taps for a 2-inch connection in Bone Park. But what about the 4 taps that are that were granted to Riverbend? What about the taps for individual properties that have been built on since the flood, since the buyouts? There are at least 3 of those, one on Overlook Drive, one on Mountain View, and not the one we just had the session on, and one on Kelling Drive that was mentioned in this discussion. And what about the tap for the botanical gardens? Why aren't those covered in this letter? And do we really have 12 unused buyout taps left?
I didn't think any of those other taps were being used from what would be classified as the buyout taps.
Right, I think we gave the library one as part of the.
Not a buyout tap. They have their own tap. They supplied their own. They bought
a CBT share.
They bought a CBT share, but we
They put up a
gave.
share, so they got a tap. What I would like to have is a complete accounting of the 23 unused taps. If some of these were not quote unquote buyout property taps, where did those taps come from for any property that didn't put up a water share? I would like the full accounting. Now, I don't know whether you would consider that Riverbend's 4 taps came from the buyout taps or not. There's
No, those were just part of the MOU, sir. Those were not part of the flood buyout, as I understand.
We can pull up, I have Jim Blankenship's document. That's all we have is what he listed for the buyout taps. So we can
I guess
provide
the
where he
related
came up
question
with
is,
that.
even if, I don't know, I don't really understand designating this tap was from the buyout, this tap wasn't. If you have 12 supposedly unused taps, but you have no water shares to cover them, you're down to 0.2 shares. I don't see what good they do. So I would really like to see, what I would like to see is connection by connection since the flood. What properties were connected without water shares? I would like to see those totaled up because I think that's how we got down to 0.2 shares, is that we allowed connections without shares being put up, which is one reason we changed the ordinance. But I've never seen a complete total of it, and I would like to see that. I would like to see an accounting of every connection, because there hasn't been, and I'm excluding Lions Valley Park, because my understanding in Lions Valley Park is it's a one-to-one thing, that every time a new lot is built under the subdivision agreement, a water share is put up. But for
Well,
places,
and
other
what-
places in town, I'd like to see every connection and whether it was a water share was put up since the flood.
Town Clerk Vasquez.
No, I was just going to say that Lions Valley Park did them like by blocks. When they did, filing 8, they dedicate 12 shares. And so
Right.
it was as they did them in chunks. But I'll get that for you and I'll put that on the action items.
Okay. All right.
And we can bring it up. We'll have to remember, we have to work with Longmont. Longmont designated these taps that were turned back into them that,
Put back
okay,
in there.
we're going to allow you to do this with those. So it wasn't, the reason they were isolated as something different is we had to go through the agreement because officially there's some language in there that does not, we've already allocated them to Longmont. So Longmont was kind of being nice about saying, okay, we're gonna say you can reuse those.
Right. We
Officially,
did
they
have
could have said, tough luck, you guys don't get these back and you don't get to use them. There had been discussion back and forth on that. And they said, okay, we will allow you not to produce new taps for up to these 23. So basically what is happening is we're not requiring them to produce the CBT share.
Right.
And so far, that's only been Bone Park and Habitat for Humanity that have not had to produce new shares. Anyone else should have to have produced a share. They were not allowed to use anything from the buyout give back program, or how we'll name it, from Longmont.
But of course, what I'm saying is that there were a number of other places that were allowed to have new connections without putting up shares. And that's what I would like to see. Riverbend being one of them. And at least 3 houses I'm aware of being, I don't believe a water share was put up for any of those other 3 houses that were built. And so the fact that we've allowed shares from our inventory to be used for those other taps, whether buyout properties are used or not, means that the unused taps left from the buyout properties are no longer much good to us because we don't have any water shares to cover them. So that's why
I'm not aware of any shares. I'm not aware of any other properties getting those shares, so I would like to see.
I mean, getting taps without a share?
What was that?
Because a share would have been transferred at the time that was platted and or tapped, depending on the situation. But I would like to have this as a general business discussion.
So would I. Thank you.
I think the essence of what Mayor Pro Tem Browning is talking about is where did let's just cut to the bone. We passed an ordinance that said that you had to dedicate a share. At that time, we had 2.5 shares. Now it's projected that we have 0.2 or whatever it says. Where did those 2 shares go? That's the essence of the question. Were those allocated to the concept that already platted lots did not have to dedicate a share? Where did at least those 2 shares go to? Because that's what got us to where we are right now. And I agree, a more comprehensive discussion on this issue needs to take place.
And I think it would be the 2 taps were not provided is what we're looking at. It looks like we're seeing 2 shares not provided out of 4
2
taps.
taps, that's exactly right. Trustee Lowell.
Yeah, I just need a little clarification. We're probably going to speak to this in more depth at the next meeting, but Town Clerk Vasquez, you mentioned that when Jason Markell, they dedicated water shares in blocks as they built out LVP.
Yes, sir.
So as you know, what happened over here is one of the most recent block, they had 4 lots there that they decided they could not build on because of the ledge on the side of the hill.
Right.
So we have 4 extra shares there?
No, the in filing 8, when Jason dedicated, and I'd have to look, it could have been like 10 or 12. And then they had to replat that section because it proved too hard to cut into the mountain. So he cut down the blocks, the lots on that block. And he had, I think, the last 2, and then he'd given up developing them himself. So then when he sold the last 2 lots on McConnell, all those shares had already been into our pool dedicated to the town. So when they were coming for a building permit, Jason, in his sale price to the property owner, was building in that price of the share. He was charging them for the share, but it was allocated to that lot within that filing. So
no, let me just ask I want to be clear on this. We're in filing 8, you know that they abandoned, it wasn't a real cul-de-sac, it was just a little cut in there next to the softball field. They abandoned that. But I'm talking about the 4 lots on the east side of McConnell that have proven too difficult to build on. There are 4 platted lots there. Carter Drive is going to cut right through the middle of 2 of them.
Dolores, I can answer that. This is before you were clerk. He bought by block and lots prior to the last filing. Filing 8 has a phase 1, a phase 2A, and a phase 2B. Right. When CBT shares went up to 70 grand each, he, I don't remember how the action was taken, but he got permission to start dedicating per share per lot on the filing phase 2A. So that was part of that. So he did not pay for those 4 lots yet.
Okay. Those, I mean, Markel determined that those 4 lots were unbuildable because they were so bony with the ledge. But they're still on the books as platted, developable lots. If somebody wanted to go to the fence.
Somebody could still do something smaller on them, sure.
Okay, thank you.
But they'll have to bring a share of water with each one.
Any further questions? Trustee Careless.
Has the town purchased any CBT shares since 2017 to go with all these different taps for these new homes before the new rules went into place?
Has the town any?
No, we make the person purchase them and then it gets transferred to the town.
Okay, because then part of the packet, make sure we have a RG and Associates letter, which I have in my own file here, from February 21st, 2017, which basically their conclusion to the town of Lyons, to us. Second paragraph, town's water supply is inefficient to meet peak build-out demands on dry years. One of the recommendations, of course, was begin buying and acquiring water shares. So, and that's what we kind of, I think we've done with the Lake McIntosh changes in the UIGA. So I think we're getting there, but make sure we include that letter or that review summary so that the new board members have access to that. Please, thank you.
Any further questions? Any further items, Madam Administrator?
Not unless there's other questions from the board about things in the community.
Did you have another question, Trustee Miller? Okay, all right. Moving on, legal update, Counselor.
Yeah, I just want to give a quick update on 3 different things, starting off with the Paul Freisig litigation matter. The town did receive an order and entry of judgment in its favor on July 28th without any conditions. And basically what that order says is that Mr. Freisig owes the town a total of $18,643.78. And there will be an interest accruing at 8% per year until the judgment is satisfied. And so that was granted by the court without any conditions on July 28th. On the same day, I believe Mr. Freisig did file for an appeal. That appeal has not been officially accepted yet. He also asked for a waiver of interest, which is unclear exactly how that would work, but he also asked in a separate filing for that. And so right now we are awaiting from the Boulder. I think he submitted to the Boulder District Court, where it should be the Court of Appeals. But regardless, we are waiting for confirmation on what the status of his appeal is. But as of right now, the town does have a judgment in its favor for $18,643.78. And that will stand so long as Colorado Court of Appeals does not strike that down. And so we'll see. We'll keep updating you as that progresses, but that's kind of the latest information on that case. So the next thing I want to give a quick update on is the Honeywell matter. The Honeywell will be visiting the site next week, the wastewater treatment plant on the 11th. I will be there along with Wayne Ramey, Aaron Kaplan, and Brightwater Engineers. And so that's one part of the mediation kind of going forward on that issue. And that's, if any more questions about that case, that's really what we're waiting for that site visit before there's any further action on that. But feel free to email myself or Paul Godek for any specifics on the status of that case. The third thing I wanted to talk about was a request at the last meeting concerning the feasibility of shutting off town utilities for people who violate code. Kind of an interesting little research project. Didn't spend a lot of time on it, but did some initial background research. As far as I can tell, there's no other municipality in Colorado, at least ones that I've looked into, that have a similar provision. Estes Park, for example, has adopted the PUC's rules for shutoffs, which are pretty restrictive. That was done a long time ago. And in Colorado, there is no PUC control over municipal utilities, as you may know. So we are pretty free to determine how our municipal utilities shall be regulated. However, in other states, there is no Colorado case law on this, but there is federal case law and case law from other states. Courts have decided that even municipal utilities have some due process protections attached to them, and essentially there has to be some sort of relationship between the reason why you're shutting off someone's utilities, and if you do shut off someone's utilities, to give them at least some minimum of due process consideration, including a notice, potential for a hearing, those sorts of things. Colorado has not evaluated what sort of due process is required for utility shutoffs at all, which is fairly interesting. So it would be a ripe area for a future court case in the future. But that's kind of the state of the law right now. I have not had a chance to follow up with CML on this. I'm curious what their thoughts were. But I hopefully get a response back sometime this week, and I can send an email if there's any more information on that. So that's, I don't want to spend too much time researching that issue, but just want to kind of give you my initial research, what it shows.
Thank you, Counselor. Any questions for Counselor at this time? Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
Quick question on that. Yeah, Brandon, on that last issue, I understand that due process would be required, and we could craft something that would say you got to give them 3 notices and 10 days to respond and that type of thing. So, I mean, the actual notice and time can be taken care of, but in terms of the relationship, and a code violation, I mean, I guess you might, are you saying there have to be some connection between there? I mean, factually, for example, someone connects an unpermitted ADU that's using water and sewer, but they never got a permit for it. Seems like to me, if you're dealing with extra water and sewer usage and you cut off the water and sewer service, there'd be a connection there.
Yeah, I think if you did, and if you look at other cities' utility codes, there is a lot in the Lions Code as well about illegal connections. I mean, if you can create some sort of framework by saying this has a direct relationship to utilities, including connections, unauthorized connections, make it even broader than illegal connections, which is I think what the Lions Code says, then that may be permissible if we were to go by the case law established in other states. As I said, there is no case law in Colorado, so we're kind of in unknown territory, but I think that would be something that the town could probably do. And the exact code provision concerning terminations, I just had it up a second ago. I think it's in 13. Sorry, I had it in front of me and then I moved it away, but we'd have to probably do a little bit of change. changing in the code. And some other municipalities, I think Carl Springs is a pretty broad reasons for shut off, but they're all very directly related to utilities. They're not like a parking ticket and we shut off your utilities. So
Yeah, I could see that. So we're writing on a blank slate. That gives us a lot of creative freedom. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll look into that some more. Okay.
Yep. Thanks.
Counselor,
Yes.
I talked to Chairman Kerr of the UEB. I requested that two UEB members that happen to be very well versed in wastewater treatment facilities be included in that meeting. My request was based on the fact that the Board of Trustees allowed all of the UEB members to receive confidential information in regard to the right wastewater report. Do you see a problem with that, sir?
Two things. One, this is just a site visit by the other side. It's not a meeting of any kind. There's no settlement will be discussed or anything. It's just they're looking at the condition of the plant to verify have their own engineers verify that the plant has problems. Essentially, what the purpose of the meeting is, and basically the attendee list has been vetted by their council, and so adding people, especially this late in the game, would probably be problematic. But I don't think there's any problem in reporting back to the UEB what happened at that site visit. I would just be concerned about this being seen as some sort of underhanded move by the town by adding people at the last minute to the approved attendee list. And so, it's nothing that I'm concerned about, but I could see the other side having concerns. And otherwise, sidelining and otherwise, it looks like a fruitful path towards some sort of settlement. And so that's just my the first I've heard of this, but it's just my kind of candid assessment of the request. But if we want to do some sort of debriefing afterwards or something, I'm happy to do that.
So basically, I erred in not letting earlier of my intentions. I mean, these people are on the UEB for a specific purpose, and I wanted them to have firsthand information in regard to what came down at that meeting. But I will defer to you, Council.
Yeah, and I apologize. Had we known about this issue earlier, then maybe we could have.
That's my fault. That's my. I'll take responsibility for that. Yeah, but we could we meet afterwards? Could the UEB meet afterwards for a debriefing?
We could talk afterwards. We could have a debrief for the UEB. It would just be with the town's own people, not with the other side.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Public hearings and ordinances. Madam Clerk, would you please read Ordinance 1086 into the record?
Yes, this is the first reading of Ordinance 1086, an ordinance of the Town of Lyons, amending Chapter 4, Article 1, Section 70 of the Lyons Municipal Code concerning the signing of warrants for the payments of bills.
Okay, staff background, and then I'll make my comment.
Yeah, so Brandon Dittman, Town Attorney, I'll give my quick kind of update, a quick staff report on this one. So it was discovered that the Lyons Municipal Code, as it reads currently, concerning the signing of warrants, and warrants is kind of a dated term, but it does come from the Colorado statutes. Essentially, is the signing of bills and invoices is what it's talking about. The language in the Lyons Municipal Code is somewhat dated and does not follow the recent changes in state law concerning electronic signatures. And so what I've done is I've drafted an ordinance updating the Lyons Municipal Code. It's actually the exact same language that is contained in the Estes Parks Municipal Code. That's where it came from. No pride of ownership, or they always say in law school, once you become an attorney, there's no such thing as plagiarism. And so I took it from a municipality who's been using this code language for a long time. And so it does comply with recent changes in Colorado law, allowing electronic signatures on warrants, which are basically invoices for bills. And so it's pretty simple ordinance. Happy to answer any questions about it, but that is the purpose of the ordinance, is to make absolutely clear that electronic signatures are permitted under the Lines Municipal Code.
Okay. Am I allowed to make a comment before a motion, Counselor?
I think it'd probably be best if there's any questions now, and then we can have a motion in a second, and then feel free to make whatever comments, so it's clear in the record about what the purpose is.
Questions at this time?
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
Yeah, I have a question. The reference in this to electronic signatures on instruments of payment, would that cover like an electronic funds transfer?
I believe it would. It was intended to be as broad as possible.
Okay. I didn't know if we made EFTs that aren't actually signed. I don't know if the town does that or not.
The finance director's on the line.
Finance Director Johnson.
Let's see if I can unmute myself here.
You're unmuted.
So yes, we do several electronic payments. Some of them are required by our debt service agreements. So with those, they are sent directly out of our account like a wire. So they are sent without any kind of signature.
And I think the relevant language is cause to be executed is kind of the language that was intended to cover that situation.
So can I comment now, Counselor?
Yeah, I guess my question is whether that language needs to be broader. I mean, when you do EFTs, you don't necessarily execute them, you just authorize them with a bank. So I don't know. If we're going to fix it, I'd like to fix it to cover all methods of payment we currently use.
And I'm happy for any suggestions. I just simply stole it from Spark. So
I'll see if I can think of something. If I can, I might offer an amendment. Thank you.
So I think questions and then motion second, and then any sort of comments or discussion at that point.
Any further questions? Do we have a motion on ordinance 1086?
I move to approve ordinance 1086.
We have a second.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 1086. Any further comments? Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
I'd like to offer an amendment, and this is totally winging it. And this would be in section 2, the second sentence where it says the mayor may execute or cause to be executed. I would like to offer an amendment that after the word may execute, I would like the words to add the words or authorize. And then all such warrants, funds transferred, funds transfers or other instruments of payment. So that way the mayor could authorize an EFT. So the amendment would be the mayor may execute or authorize, or cause to be executed all such warrants. Forgot my own language.
Yeah, me too.
Warrants, funds, transfers, or other instruments of payment.
And Mayor Pro Tem Browning, have you written that down by chance? Just
No.
I'm trying to pull up the ordinance as we're going.
Okay.
I think I got it. Did you get
Okay.
it, Dolores?
I think I got it.
So let me try to
I'll second what you guys think you got.
The mayor may execute or authorize, or cause to be executed all such warrants or funds transfers, as you say, all such warrants, funds transfers, or other instruments of payment.
I'll still second that.
We have a motion and a second for an amendment as stated by Mayor Pro Tem Browning. Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
and Trustee Rogan.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously. The amendment passes unanimously, excuse me. I would like to make an amendment. I would like wherever the ordinance states the mayor, I would like language added that says, or the mayor pro tem in his or her absence.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second on that amendment. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
Trustee Rogan.
Aye.
The amendment passes unanimously. Are there any further amendments? Seeing none, we'll vote on, discussion. Now is the time for discussion, Counselor. I finally got it right. Counselor. We used to do it the opposite way, so habits are very difficult to break. Let me start on this since I brought this up. It was always really a pleasure to sign the checks. It was basically the last check and balance, let's say. And it was really pleasurable. And I understand that was 20 years ago, and welcome to the 21st century. And I don't have a problem with that. But I do have a problem. I did have a problem with this. I had a problem with invoices paid electronically before they were brought for a final review. Now, it's the Board of Trustees' prerogative to approve the accounts payable. That's not a mayoral prerogative. So the accounts payable have been approved, but between Thursday night, Friday basically, and Monday, not many trustees take the initiative to actually look at invoices, item by item. I do because I consider that, like I said, the last check and balance. And there have been a couple of instances where if invoices would not have been paid electronically, I would have challenged the invoice amount, as is in the past anyway, the prerogative of the mayor, and a fairly strong negotiating position. Whereas the electronic accounts payable were already paid before I could review them. So that didn't give me much negotiating power. Let me just put it that way. And I'll bring up a couple of instances specifically, and I'll hurry because we have a lot on the agenda. A legal bill for a couple of letters that I think could have just as easily been mediated with a couple of phone calls that ended up costing the town almost a couple of $1,000s. The firm that was working on the bridge, an item that we have an incredible amount of overage on. I never got an explanation on a rather substantial amount of money on whether FEMA had changed a regulation in regard to how many feet the bottom of the bridge had to be from the river. So I don't know, I didn't know whether that FEMA regulation changed or whether the engineer made a mistake. But withholding, I guarantee you one thing, withholding that amount of money, I would have found out very, very quickly. So that's basically why I brought this up. And like I said, I don't mind that the bills are, that the invoices are paid electronically. I especially don't mind that the payroll is paid electronically, because that's rather confidential. We can get that information at budget time perhaps. But I just wanted to basically let everybody know what brought this forward. And the only thing that I would suggest, and it does, we don't have to amend this, I don't believe, Counselor, but I would like to at least have the prerogative to review the electronic invoices, the invoices that are projected to be paid electronically be reviewed by me before they're paid. Not the other way around, because it doesn't give me any leverage. And I take that responsibility very, very seriously. And I have in the past, and I will continue to. So, I mean, it's, you know, I don't know, Madam Administrator, whether you could do that administratively, whether the finance director can do that, but I would at least appreciate that capability. And that's how this came about. Any further discussion? If not, do we have a motion to pass ordinance 1086 as amended?
We do with, well, we have an original motion to pass and all the amendments have been voted on.
So we need a vote at this point.
So we need a motion to pass ordinance 1086 as amended.
We need a vote on the motion.
Final.
Vote on the ordinance as amended.
Okay.
First reading.
Okay. Do we have a motion to amend ordinance 1086 as amended?
We already have a motion and second, Mayor. We just need the vote.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
It was Trustee Rogan and Trustee Carvis.
Okay. All right, then call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
and Trustee Rogan.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously on first reading. Okay, consent agenda. Do we have anyone that would like to pull any of the consent agenda? Go ahead, sir.
I'd like to pull number 1, please.
Sir, do you want me to read it in for the record first?
Oh, I
Yeah,
always
that helps.
make that mistake. Town Clerk Vasquez, I'm so sorry. Please read the consent agenda into the record.
All right. Item 1 is resolution 2020-121, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, approving a memorandum of understanding, MOU, for collaboration and coordination to improve forest health and reduce wildfire risk in Boulder County, Colorado, between Boulder County and Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the County State Forest Service, the City of Longmont, the City of Boulder, the Boulder County communities of Nederland, Gold Hill, Lyons, Ward, and Jamestown, the Longmont Conservation District, the Boulder Valley Conservation District, the Boulder County Firefighters Association, the Colorado Forest Restoration Institute at Colorado State University, the United States Department of Agriculture, Forest Service, Arapahoe and Roosevelt National Forests, and Pawnee National Grassland. Item number 2 is resolution 2020-122, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, ratifying the 8th Amendment to the Disaster Recovery Services Agreement with OTAC Incorporated for capital improvement and drainage design services for the 2nd Avenue Bridge Project. Item 3 is Resolution 2020-123, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, approving a second amendment to the professional services agreement with Anderson Consulting Engineers Incorporated for design services for the St. Vrain Creek Recovery Project. Item 4 is Resolution 2020-124, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, ratifying the 8th Amendment to the Disaster Recovery Services Agreement with DHM Design Corporation for Bone Park Design. Item 5 is Resolution 2020-125, a resolution of the Town of Lyons, Colorado, ratifying the 7th Amendment to the construction agreement with CGRS Incorporated for the Eastern Corridor Utilities Project. Item 6 is Resolution 2020-126, a resolution appointing 2 new members to the Board of Trustees to the Lyons Regional Library District. Item 7 is the August accounts payable. Item 8 are the July 6, 2020 regular Board of Trustees meeting minutes. And item 9 is the July 20th, 2020 regular Board of Trustees meeting minutes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Now, would anybody wish to pull any items from the consent agenda?
I'd like to pull number 1, please.
Okay. Any others?
Mayor Angelo, I would like to pull item 7, the August accounts payable.
Yes, sir. Anybody else? Trustee Rogan?
I'd like to pull number 2, please.
Okay. Anybody else? I would like to pull item 3 because I want a discussion in regard to that. So with those exceptions, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
We have 2 motions.
Oops,
Do we
sorry.
have a second?
A second. Mark.
We have a motion and a second to approve the amended consent agenda. I'll call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
and Trustee Rogan.
Aye.
The amended consent agenda passes unanimously. Trustee Caravas.
Thanks. I just had a couple of questions. So I'm, all for this and we'll go to passage because some of the other board members I served with know at the CML conference, there was a big talk with the State Fire Marshal's office when we were in Vail, Colorado. And a healthy forest is known by most that it's approximately 40 trees per acre, and Colorado sits at an average of about 200 trees per acre. So yeah, we do have problems, and the state and counties are working on it. One question, I just want to make a statement though, concerning Boulder County. They, after the flood, in several of the meetings I sat in with them, agreed that a lot of the backups all the way up the mountain to the Continental Divide was just leftover debris that was set, just left there for years, part of the environmentalism of the 60s and 70s. Not only does it burn, but it clogged rivers and drainage ways and caused a lot of flooding. They said they learned their lesson, not going to let that happen. Within 2 years, all the basswood trees on the south side of St. Vrain River in Laverne Johnson Park died due to probably root suffocation of sand in the silt. And we asked them to, I asked staff to get with Boulder County to get those removed, and Boulder County said no. So we have 15, 20, 30 dead trees ready to fall at some point in time, and will be the first thing clogging up the Fifth Avenue Bridge. So I just wanted to throw on the record that Boulder County is saying we're going to work with this. Change. Then I have a question. Page 59 of our packet, section 3A7, talks about parties will seek to increase the capacity of county fire districts so they can play a greater role in outreach and engagement. I was just kind of curious, a little bit further definition of capacity. Are they talking hiring more employees? That increased mill levy they were charged as our taxes are high as it is, and we have people talking about the cost of living here. And some of us who have dealt with the fire department, Lyons district here, speaking of capacity of actual engine and pumping and ladder use is stalling development here. Well, I just want a little bit better definition of capacity in this section, if staff were turning those.
This is Dave Cosgrove, Director of Parks and Public Works. I also have Jesse Olson here from Left Hand Watershed Center, who actually approached our ecology board. David on the line too with the ecology board. Jesse might be better to answer this question than myself if she knows for sure. I know she's been working with the other communities and entities involved in this collaboration as well for this MOU.
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up the exact page on the MOU right now. Do you have a page number on that?
I only have I believe it's 9.
Okay, cool.
Hopefully your name is my 9.
Let me see. Okay, so I think basically what they're talking about with staff capacity is just a commitment for staff to collaborate. And there's no commitment in terms of the actual time commitment that people would actually need to commit to. So it's pretty flexible. On the broadest sense, the fire districts are incorporated in the MOU via the Boulder County Fire Chiefs Association. So they're basically represented within that signer of the committee, and they would basically be agreeing to participate on the ground with these forest health projects.
Okay. Thank you. Included with that, then, as I guess the question it indicates, looks like it talks about the defensible space and home improvements. So the Lions Fire District then kind of just offer solutions to town staff to give to the board or come to the board every so often, or a group of this collaboration to say, hey, there's some areas of town that need to maybe do some better work. Kind of look at it. Is that what you guys are? Is that what we're looking at?
Right. So we would be operating within the St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership at a very large landscape scale across the entire St. Vrain Basin. And the partners within that collaboration would decide where the priority work areas are. And they would say, here's where we generally want to work across these boundaries and these land ownerships. And they would say, all right, this is the general area. Now we're going to talk about the approach we would take to reach our desired future conditions to make a resilient forest that, actually has trees year round, long term, and can withstand disease. And so that collaboration would decide whether or not they want to take the same approach or not. And so the fire districts can decide to participate, or they can say, we don't have the resources to support this particular project. And it really is clear within the St. Vrain Forest Health Partnership that those individual entities can make their own decisions, and they wouldn't be tied to doing what the neighbors decide to do. The point is just to be able to have those conversations and facilitate collaboration across the landscape to make better decisions as a community, so that we can achieve the vision of having these healthy, resilient forests long term.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I needed. Just had those same questions to clarify for me. So I appreciate that.
Thank you, Trustee Caravas. I'll take these in order. Trustee Rogan.
Thank you. So this is yet another increase to the Second Avenue Bridge project. This time in the amount of almost $30,000. So now we're looking at an original agreement of $211,000.
Mary Angela, if I may, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
go ahead. Sir.
We did not have a resolution or motion in a second to pass the first item pulled for consent.
Excuse me, Counselor?
We have not passed the item that Trustee Caravas has pulled from consent.
I probably need to pass mine first before we move on.
We have to take them one at a time?
Yeah.
That's what we typically do.
Okay, that's fine.
Motion.
Okay.
I move to pass resolution 2020-121.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and 2 seconds to pass resolution 2020-121. Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
and Trustee Rogan.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Pardon me, Trustee Rogan. Now you can continue.
Oh, no problem. So, you know, I want to know, being fairly new to the board here, how many more amendments we can expect and how we're actually going to wind up paying for all of this. You know, it seems to me that almost every meeting, there's another amendment to the Second Avenue Bridge adding more money. And I honestly just don't know where that money is coming from. So I'd look to staff to answer that question. Where's the money coming from? And then, is this normal in a project of this size to keep getting these amendments month after month? And what do we really estimate the cost of this bridge to be?
Staff?
Those are all good questions. And unfortunately, Tracy Sanders isn't able to get on the Zoom call right now. What I can tell you is that every FEMA project has, the amendments get approved via them. So if it's a legitimate cost, they will reimburse it. There's no question with that. Okay. How many amendments you can expect? It just depends on the project, the scope, what they run into. Just as we didn't, I mean, we may have several more amendments on this one, depending on what happens with the neighbors. You know, that could make further amendments. We haven't even started construction. One of the things that we can't, we aren't, oh, she's on now. She just said she's on now. Tracy, if you can hear us, the question is, how many more amendments can we anticipate having overall? And at what point do we need to be concerned that FEMA won't reimburse them?
I can't anticipate how many amendments we may or may not have. It's a little harder with the consultants. You know, we put together initially a scope of work of what we think is needed for a design, but things can come up, and we do ensure that anything that they request for added services and fee, we negotiate those. We also discuss them. We also do reasonable and necessary. And FEMA will continue to reimburse as long as the amendments are reasonable and necessary.
And it's FEMA that decides whether they're reasonable and necessary?
Yes, and so we do our due diligence ahead of time to, like I said, you know, anything they request, we go back to them and we have a whole worksheet that we can do to determine if something's reasonable and that to show that it's reasonable and necessary. But we do go back and question them and push back and negotiate. Sometimes we can get them down on the fee or the hours they're requesting. So we always try to do that the best we can. But a lot of things come up in the scope that aren't anticipated. And so I try to explain all those in the cover memo as they come up. But I have asked OTEC specifically, you know, I let them know that they really need to be thinking about what else is needed because we don't want to keep doing these amendments. They need to think about what is needed to finish this project. And so I asked them to put the thought into this last amendment. And I did have them add an amendment before construction administration because that will be needed once we go into construction. So that's been added. So, I mean, we do our best to negotiate these and ensure that it's needed. But
yeah, I don't doubt that. You know, I took a little bit of a dive into the details of this, and I noticed some things that may be totally normal in the construction industry, but I just want people to be aware that, you know, they've got a project manager billing project management hours to the project, which makes total sense. they also have engineers billing project management hours to the project, which may make sense in this context, but it just jumped out at me that I just want to be careful that we're making sure that these amendments are really necessary and justified.
I can tell you that this morning, flood recovery manager Sanders and myself met, and we are getting concerned with the amount of amendments before the bridge is even started. And we discussed talking to one of the principals of the corporation to make sure that we aren't paying for maybe the lack of experience someone they've assigned to this project is costing us. So this is on the front of our radar as well. I have to say, when I saw it was on the agenda again, I cringed thinking, oh my, here's another one. So we are very much aware of this, and we are having a phone call this week with the principal.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And let me just add that was exactly my concern, Tracy, in regard to, and I forget what it's called, the distance between the river and the bottom of the bridge. And I still don't know whether FEMA had changed that regulation between the start of that design, or that the person who was the engineer at the time made the mistake. I still don't know that. Do you know the answer to that? That was $60,000.
Yeah, honestly, well, that $10,000, that was for, okay, originally, if you're asking about the design, I don't think it was clearly stated from FEMA what they were looking for in that bridge mitigation. That's why we had to go through a couple iterations of design. Then after going back and forth with FEMA, we clearly understood what they were looking for in order to meet the mitigation requirements. However, that extra $10,000 was for the 196 and 194 2nd Avenue wanted to see what the impacts would be to their property. So we did some modeling to show them the impacts after grading. We also asked them, the engineer, to go back and see if there's any other option for grading to avoid the private properties. And he went back and looked at it, and there was no other way to avoid the grading on that property. So trying to work through these private property issues has cost us some additional money. And part of that too is because we had such a gap in there from the time we started the project to now. And like I said before, we had one team of engineers working on it, and all staff changed with the OTAC and all staff changed with the town. So we had to probably revisit some things that may have already been addressed and didn't have the history on too. So it's been a unique situation with this contract specifically because of all the factors that have gone into it and all the years of trying to get to where we are now. So it's kind of a bit unique.
I don't want to belabor the point, but what I was referring to was a $60,000 cost to come up with the approved FEMA design of the distance between the river and the bottom of the bridge. It doesn't have anything to do with any private property owners and right-of-ways. And what I need to know is whether we did our due diligence and that was a change in FEMA requirements, or that was a mistake by the engineer. Because I'm the kind of guy that if it was a mistake by the engineer, I'm not going to pay him $60,000.
Right.
No.
I don't think it's a mistake of the engineer. That was not a clearly communicated requirement from FEMA. And it took over 2 years to understand to get everybody on the same page.
Okay, so in that case, is that a reimbursable expense from FEMA?
Sure.
It will not. So the first 2 designs will not be reimbursed by FEMA, but we have CDBG funds lined up to cover those costs, those ineligible costs. So they will be covered by CDBG. FEMA will cover the current design that we are going with.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Mayor.
Yes.
But to clarify, those are still our tax dollars. So Trustee Rogan has a very good point, and something I fought with, as staff knows, in my first term on the board, with the engineering and architectural errors by those firms with Laverne Johnson Park. And we did go after them. And of course, our previous law firm and staff said, well, if it costs too much to recoup those funds, we'll just let it go. Well, you're right, Trustee Rogan. The industry, commercial and construction industry, is not what it was in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Started changing in the late 90s. And it's, if you want to talk offline, I can tell you some horror stories and I tell you where the problems lie. And the mayor's statements about engineering firms and architectural firms, yeah, we should watch it very closely. And as we build this bridge, because if they design something, they do something wrong, it is not the taxpayers of the country or the state's responsibility to pay for it. They are supposed to put, and they should have, contingencies in their contracts with us and or FEMA, which is basically us, to cover their errors. Every construction company does, every bid does, but no one holds these firms accountable anymore. So it's a very good catch by you. And if you want to talk more offline about it, I'll be more than happy to. But good catch.
This isn't anybody's error. When we first did the scope of this bridge, the FEMA rules were the bridge has to be 2 foot above base flood elevation. It wasn't until we got into the mitigation stage, which is another chapter of FEMA, that they said 2 foot above base flood is not good enough. We want you to build this to handle the same identical flood next time. And we want it 5 feet above base flood elevation. And so that's when, I mean, all the designs that have been done have to be thrown out. A 5 foot bridge span compared to a 2 foot makes the bridge go from this to this. And it took years, like Tracy said, and 3 engineers over that time to negotiate with FEMA on what exactly were they wanting and where in the regs does it ever say 5 feet, because it doesn't. That was the mitigation team. And they said, if you want to rebuild this bridge and not repair it, you have to build it 5 feet. So I don't think there's any engineering errors. I think, like Tracy said, it was negotiating the mitigation so that they don't have $45 million of claims next time this happens.
And I didn't say there were at this time, but what Trustee Rogan has brought up is we're at number 8 and we haven't built a bridge yet. We haven't started building a bridge yet. We're at number 8. So it's something to watch.
I absolutely agree with you. It is a bit challenging to negotiate all these change orders they're requesting. I am trying to get help and feedback and deferring to our other engineers that we have to assist on this. I have my concerns as well, but really we're at 100% design, and now what's left is basically for them to review submittals and our request for information. So we're at the tail end of what their part is in this project to a point. But I agree with you. I'm not happy with all these change orders or these additional costs. But again, as Victoria said, this is not an error on their part, other than maybe they left some things out of their scope of work. But also we've come back and asked for additional things. We've asked for additional modeling. We asked for additional review of the grading. We've asked for a floodplain permit, which I don't know how that got missed in the beginning, but that's required. And they said they didn't have in the contract. So there's just a lot of things, but it's just hard because this has changed hands and it's been years of different people involved.
Any further questions? Mayor Pro Tem Browning, you pull the accounts payable?
Oh, we didn't pass it first.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. Do I have a motion to pass resolution 2020-122?
So moved, and I'd like to thank staff for the responses. They were very educational, so thank you.
Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second for approval of resolution 2020-122. Any further discussion? Please call the roll, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
and Trustee Rogan.
Aye.
Resolution 2020-122 passes unanimously. Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
Mayor Angelo, if I may, you also pulled item 3, the Anderson Engineers resolution.
Yes, I did.
And so we'll need to pass that as well.
I know that. I know that. I pulled that, so I want to do that after.
Okay.
After Mayor Pro Tem Browning. Go ahead.
The reason I pulled the accounts payable as listed in the agenda is that I would like to limit our approval of the accounts payable to those that were listed in the posted agenda, and specifically exclude the additional accounts payable that were emailed to all of us at 3:50 p.m. this afternoon, because I have philosophical problems with being provided accounts payable information at 3:50 p.m. on the day of the board meeting and voting to approve it that night. So that's the reason I pulled it, and I'll defer to other discussion, I guess, and then move.
So are you saying that, I didn't get that, and I'm sorry. Are you saying there are additional invoices?
At 3:50 p.m. this afternoon, an email was sent to all the board members adding accounts payable, excuse me, that I couldn't really tell if they were really proposed to be approved tonight. It mentioned the August 3rd meeting. So I'm going to move to approve the accounts payable as listed in the agenda as posted last week, excluding anything added since then, including those that were sent at 3:50 p.m. this afternoon.
And could I have an explanation of that, Madam Administrator, please?
Actually, I can kind of respond to that, Victoria, if you want me to.
Or Finance Director Johnson would probably be better. Thank you.
Of course. So we process accounts payable all the way up until Thursday when we get the board packet ready. And then after the board packet is ready, sometimes we do have like flood receivables and just some other invoices that come in that we do an update for you guys. As I understand, and this is, I haven't done it very often because there's always been somebody that has done it. The accounts payable clerk has done this, but it's my understanding that this is a normal practice where we do send the update on Monday. And Town Clerk, you can hopefully explain that as well.
Yes, if I may, typically those were just placed on the dais for the board, even with the previous board. If there was any update, they would all be laid out on the dais for them. So there's the big pack that they can put together for your review on Thursday. And if any last minute stragglers need to come in that got in, they'll do an update and then that's presented to the board as well. And typically that, like I said, was laid out on the dais as you guys walked into the meeting. So.
Okay, I guess what I'm suggesting is I don't think that practice should be continued to be followed. There's been a number of issues that I've raised lately about last minute submissions to the board. And things that had to be postponed, and I just don't think we ought to do that anymore. I don't think we ought to have to review things. The mayor spoke earlier about wanting to review invoices and make sure things were reviewed before they were paid. Well, I just don't think something sent basically an hour and a half before the workshop begins can have a meaningful trustee review, or laid on the dais during the meeting. I don't think we ought to do that practice anymore. I think those will just have to be deferred until the next meeting. Let's change that practice.
Is that going to cause a problem, Finance Director Johnson?
Not as far as I'm aware. We will just do it as requested.
And
I have a small problem with that. If there's only one or two items and we identify.
Madam Administrator, you haven't been recognized.
I'm sorry.
Counselor, this is very important to me. can we pay accounts payable that aren't noticed?
If it's already been noticed as an update to the amounts, then, you know, a non-substantive change, then maybe, I don't know. I was not privy to this email, so I don't know what the contents of it are. So I can't give an opinion as to the extent to which it can be approved as part of this meeting.
We have been very strict in regard to many times having the agenda not presented to us as advertised, and had to make that correction. So I understand where Mayor Pro Tem Brown is coming from. And unless it would hurt our financial standing with any of these accounts, I would agree with him 100%. Any other comments? Madam Administrator.
You're on mute.
There could be some issues as we get closer to the final deadlines on our DR funding that has to be spent within that month, or we will lose it. So there may be some occasions where we need to do this. If there's only, maybe if she would identify the changes between Thursday and Monday, and there's only one or two and we need to discuss it. But again, I'm a little concerned if you say no way, we have to wait till the next meeting, and the next meeting's not for 3 weeks. That could cause some, we might need to have a special meeting for accounts payable, I guess.
And that's why I asked about.
And this has been a practice for years.
Yeah, anybody, it has been?
Yes, absolutely. Every Monday night, there's a new list.
Okay.
And let me see where my camera is.
Finance Director Johnson.
So in the update that we provide to you, that we provided on today, it is just the additional items. It isn't a full list again. So you got to pick and choose what's already been in the list and what. So the original list that was put in the packet is not duplicated. These are additional invoices that have come in since Thursday and been approved. So we don't put anything on this list that has not been staff approved.
Can I just ask, without belaboring the point, how many items are we talking about?
So there's actually quite a few items on this list. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Maybe 20 items. It totals about $119,000, which is about half of the accounts payable, a little bit less.
I'll reiterate in that case, I'm sorry. I'll reiterate my support for Trustee Mayor Pro Tem Browning's position on this. It's not something I think is prudent, to be perfectly honest with you. I wish that we could get those done on Thursday, but and I'm sorry, I was very busy today and I didn't see that. But that many accounts payable to be presented to the Board of Trustees, I can't approve of that technique. I don't think that's right. But I'm only one person. Any further discussion?
One more bit. If these invoices were not received until after Thursday, then it seems like they would wait 2 weeks to be paid. That'd be payment within 14 days of receipt, 14 to 17 days of receipt. So I can't believe that they're that expedited.
Any further discussion? Yes, Finance Director Johnson.
So the invoices weren't necessarily received after Thursday. They were approved after Thursday. So these invoices could be from some time ago, maybe somebody was on vacation, maybe it didn't get routed quickly enough. So these invoices are not received after Thursday. They are just approved after Thursday.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Town Clerk Vasquez.
Also, just for information, it typically isn't that many, we've got a new accounts payable temp that is filling in. So it probably is just taking her a little bit longer to get all of the data entered. So it's typically not to the tune of half the accounts payable. It's just a couple of items here and there.
Trustee Lowell.
Thank you. It was suggested before in this conversation, wouldn't it be a reasonable compromise to just have any of the new items highlighted on the report? Would that be amenable?
That's what was mailed today. When I sent out that email that I got from Director Johnson, the email was just the new approved ones. It wasn't the entire list. It was just the new items.
It's okay. We understand this is a large amount, and do what we need to do. And we can try to work on internal procedures to get everything approved prior to Wednesday.
We haven't had the vote yet.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
We haven't had the vote yet. Any further discussion? If not, I imagine the intent of the discussion was that we wouldn't continue with this practice. Do I have that correct, Mayor Pro Tem Browning?
I think that's the better way to do it.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Is that a motion to approve with?
I think my motion was to approve the payables that were included in the posted agenda as of last Thursday or Friday.
Yes,
The original packet and not the one sent to me.
Right,
Got it.
correct.
And it still needs a second.
Yes, it still does. Do we have a second?
And
We have a motion and a second, as stated by Mayor Pro Tem Browning. Please call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Yes, Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
No.
Trustee Miller,
Okay.
and Trustee Robin.
aye.
The motion passes 1, 2, 3, 4 to 2. Is it 5 to 1? I didn't understand you, Trustee Miller. Pardon me. 5 to 1, it passes. I brought resolution 2020-123 forward to talk about the fact that is this the bank? Are we talking about the bank mitigation? I find it interesting. Again, we're talking about money. I find it interesting that there was an opportunity for an individual to get a grant to mediate this. Wouldn't have cost the town anything. We have a developer now who, it's not their responsibility necessarily, but they've been afforded some concessions. But I find it amazing that now, if I'm reading this correctly, we have to come up with an additional, is it $23,000? Trustee Lowe.
Mayor Angelo, that's the wrong banking. I believe this one is the one that goes from the Highland Dam down on town land. This is the Keith Bell property.
This goes where?
This is the one, Highland Dam on the river west that goes down to the Keith Bell property. It's not the Keith Bell property that now owned by Summit.
It's not.
It's all on public property.
Whose property?
Public, ours.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. So I'll withdraw my objection and I don't think there'll be any further discussion on that. My misunderstanding. So is there a motion to approve? If there's no further discussion, to approve resolution 2020-123? We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Mayor Angelo,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning,
Aye.
Trustee Caravas,
Aye.
Trustee Lowell,
Aye.
Trustee Miller,
Yay.
and Trustee Rogan.
Aye.
Resolution 2020-123 passes unanimously. Let's see, Lions Communication, transfer of ownership. Staff report, please.
Yeah, I was just unmuting and getting, so we have, Lions Communication is the cable operator in town who has a franchise agreement. And they also have a head-end lease. And there is an interested buyer to that assets of Lions Communications, a local resident who was interested in purchasing that. And in that, the notes there were that he would continue the franchise agreement as is for the duration of that agreement, but there was the request to extend the actual lease of the property to a 10-year lease to accommodate his buyers, to accommodate his finance. And I guess with that, we do have an executive session later on, so I could introduce, I see Mr. Kevin Mahoney is on the call. Mr. Mahoney, if you had anything you wanted to say as an introduction or to go through it, a lot of the details we can talk about during the executive session when you can actually talk about negotiations of sales. This was a time for us to introduce you for that. If you are able to unmute your, yep.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the opportunity, and just want to introduce myself. Me and my family recently moved to the Lions area. I've been working with Rob in Lions Communications for just over a year. I've become very familiar with his vision of the business, and my family and I have become very attached to this town and its residents. So we're hoping to be a very close-knit company and support the town. I have to warn you though, my wife does love parades. So you'll probably be seeing us in a upcoming parade whenever they start back up. So thank you all, and I look forward to working with you guys going into the future.
Kevin, could you give us your address for the record, please?
Yeah, my I don't live in the town of Lyons. I live outside, but my physical address is 2708 Eagle Ridge Road.
Thank you. Any further comments or discussion, questions?
And we did have it as direction to staff, but I thought with the executive session, we would wait until the executive session, or do we want to move forward? I suppose it would depend on how the board felt, if they needed the executive session, or Attorney Dittman.
I think we definitely want to have the executive session and talk about the terms of the transfer of the franchise, and particularly section 10 of the existing franchise and what that means. But I think now would be a great opportunity. The board has any questions for Kevin, his ability to run the business and that sort of thing. If the board has such questions, now would be a good time to ask those things.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. I'm not clear on whether the requested extension of the lease is for 10 years from now or 10 years from the date of the lease, which was, I believe, April of 2018.
Is that a question for me? Sorry.
Or anybody, you or Mr. Kaplan, either one.
Yes, the extension would be from the date of transfer of ownership.
So 10 years from really whenever the documents are finalized. So it'll be another 10 years added to the existing lease.
No, I
It
would
would effectively be a new lease starting at the transfer of ownership, which would be for approximately 10 years, or exactly 10 years.
10 years from the date ownership is transferred would be the lease term. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And then what entity would be the purchasing entity? Is this you individually, or is there some other entity?
No, the entity is Colorado Communications LLC.
And are you the 100, would you be the 100% owner of that?
No, I do have a 10% business partner.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand. I couldn't hear. What was?
I do have a business partner with 10% ownership.
So you would own 90%?
Correct.
Okay. And a question for Utilities Director Kaplan. Has the UEB reviewed this?
No, they have not. They have not dealt with franchise. They didn't review the last one or any dealings with the cable franchise agreement.
So my question was whether they have reviewed this agreement relating to an important utility for the town of Lyons.
Right, and I said no.
Okay.
Any further questions? Trustee Rogan.
Hey, Kevin, thanks for joining us. I'm wondering if you can give us a little bit of your professional background. What's your career been like to date, and how do you think you'd best support the town?
Sure. So I've been working in the telecommunications industry for about 15 years. I've worked mostly in a design and research capacity. I've worked for large telecoms like Ericsson out of Sweden. Well, they're actually global. And more recently, I've worked for a company called Cable Labs. So for those not familiar, Cable Labs is a not-for-profit kind of research arm of the cable industry, where I was exposed to a number of cable operators. I got to learn how operators operate. I also got to help work on architecting and designing the devices in the networks that run cable plants. And then, of course, working with Rob over the last year, I've gotten to know his plant somewhat well, as well as I've been helping him with a couple of projects, bringing internet to the outlying areas of town, which don't currently have wired connectivity. So I've been designing those networks and implementing them with the oversight of Rob.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So we'll move on. Discussion and direction to staff on Longmont Water Pipeline Project and potential pump station location. Staff?
Hi. Thank you, Mayor Angelo. Can you see me? Is my camera on?
Yes, sir.
I wanted to give you an update and let you know that Longmont, I believe, is on the call and is able to answer. Yes, Mr. Larry Waymo is on the line, who is requesting the pump station location. We've been working with Longmont for about a month and a half on a location for a pump station in the town of Lyons. They're trying to augment the pressure in their system. And we've been looking at several locations and came down to looking at one, which is the parking lot that is across from the fire station as the ideal location for the potential utility. The reason that's potentially the best location is it's kind of on both of the lines and can serve both of those lines. The options we have for this, well, first off, the question is whether this is a good site. you know, we've looked at several. We looked at all the way up from adjacent to Laverne Johnson Park, all the way down to near the Black Bear Hole as options. And we really couldn't settle on another location that was very good. We think this location could work in that it's not, you know, it's not, while there's a portion of this site that's being utilized for parking, the area that we're looking at is not necessarily being used for parking. So when we started looking at this, we started looking at whether it was right of way or, you know, what the status of the parcel was. And as you can see in the cover letter, there is a parcel between 3rd Street that past 2nd that goes along the railroad that was acquired by the town, but was never turned into right of way. So it still remains a parcel. That background is important to how we can move forward. They're hoping to move forward, you know, get some direction fairly soon about how we're moving forward. Longmont would, you know, ideally like to own the parcel upon which they plan to put their facility, but they're open to an easement and the option of a right of way. We also discussed the option of a lease, which didn't seem like it would fit their grant funding nearly as well as these other 3 options. So we could do a permanent lease by which we identify an area, you know, survey it, do an easement, do an easement agreement, and bring that forward to you for review and approval. There most likely would be an appraisal and exchange of some type of funds, but we haven't negotiated that far. The second real option would be changing this whole parcel, or at least a portion of it, dedicating it as right of way. And that makes sense for some reasons. Number one, we have a roadway there. And in a roadway, you often, most of the time, access off a roadway, you're creating a right of way when you're doing that. We went back and tried to determine why it was never changed into right of way, and we couldn't find a reason. So we're not sure why it never went from being a parcel to right of way. In order to change it into right of way, we have to go through a platting process. So we have to go out and survey, and it would, in that plat, dedicate a portion as right of way, or the whole thing as right of way. Or if we don't do the whole thing, we could do the roadway as right of way and the parking lot as a separate piece. This parcel has never been zoned, so we don't have a restriction on the parcel size when we plat this this particular parcel. Normally, when you plat and you're going to a particular zone, you have a restriction on parcel size. But because this is just unzoned land, we can parcel off a piece and sell it if we wish. As staff, we feel kind of creating the right of way and a separate piece that is this parking lot may be the most appropriate way to move forward. But that said, I wanted to give Larry the opportunity, if the board thinks it's appropriate, to address the board, because Longmont has been working with us. That's Mr. Waymo. And I know Victoria has been working on this as well, so she may have some comments.
Go ahead, sir.
Mayor Angelo and board members, I'm Larry Wino. I'm with Public Works Natural Resources Engineering Services Division. We've had a long history working with the town of Lyons on several different things. I think most of you are aware of some of the recent things we've done. Prior to that, the sale of the North and South plant, and we worked with the town of Lyons for several years to try to be able to make that property available to the town of Lyons. So there are several things that we have worked together with. This is, again, kind of a continuation of this relationship we have with the town of Lyons. And I'd like to actually have Jason Elkins, who's the project manager, discuss more of the project. He's been involved in this project on a day-to-day basis, so he can fill you in on any or answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Jason, your name and address for the record, sir.
Mayor Angelo, Board of Trustees, I'm Jason Elkins. I am the Water Resources Engineer for the City of Longmont. I am managing the South St. Vrain Pipeline Pump Station project. As Paul had mentioned, we are looking at trying to locate a space within the town of Lyons that is outside of the floodplain, where we can put a pump station that will allow us to pump water from our South St. Vrain pipeline into the North St. Vrain pipeline. As you may or may not be aware, the North St. Vrain pipeline that we have feeds directly into the Nelson Flanders water treatment plant. The South St. Vrain pipeline that we have feeds into the Highland Ditch. And in the wintertime, it's very difficult for us to get water from the Highland Ditch to the Nelson Flanders water treatment plant. So as part of the South St. Vrain pipeline rehab project that we have going on now, we're trying to get that pipeline being back up in operation by spring of next year. To complement that, and for redundancy and resiliency, should another flood event happen, we would like to put a pump station in that also connects the South St. Vrain to the North St. Vrain. That's kind of our grand scheme. Oh, and then the other thing I'd like to mention is we're looking to make it a below ground pump station. So in theory, when this is done, you should not even know that there's a pump station there.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions for either Jason? I certainly don't object. I think that that if it doesn't cut down any parking spaces, if it's underground, I think it's important for us to maintain our stellar relationship with the city of Longmont. I think that's incredibly important for us. That's my opinion. Would anybody else wish to speak? Trustee Rogan.
Thanks, Mayor. I have a question. So should this move forward in this location, about how long would you expect the construction of it to take? And I'm curious about whether there would be any impacts to the fire department being able to get in and out as they need.
Trustee Rogan, it would be our intent to have this fully constructed and up and running before the end of 2021. That is the FEMA PAP funding that we have requires us to have this project completed by 2021. Construction of the project should take no more than 4 to 6 weeks, given season, given the season and stuff like that. Yeah, we would not try to hinder the fire department's access whatsoever. We'd be working exclusively with them so that they anything that we do during construction would not hinder their abilities to get in and out. And any type of temporary shutdowns we would have to have along Railroad Road would be coordinated with them. And we would do anything that we can to try to minimize traffic impacts to the town of Lyons and the fire department.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
How, if Longmont were to acquire this ownership of this small parcel. How would you go about setting a price or value on that?
Mayor Pro Tem Browning, I'm not exactly sure what the official policy is for that. I would believe it would require us to go out and get an appraisal following FEMA regulations. We're not quite there yet. I think the conversations that we've had so far have been leaning more towards a right-of-way dedication. But if the town were to want to sell us this parcel of land, I think we would have to dive into those details, but the city of Longmont would want to acquire that land prior to applying for our FEMA PAP funding. We need to have the location secured. So we either need to say that we're going to buy it or we're going to install the pump station onto a right-of-way. So that decision needs to be made, and then how we go about valuing the land, that's something we would have to do further down the road.
You know, whatever form it takes, whether it's outright ownership or right-of-way permanent dedication or something like that. I was just wondering how the value would be determined. This is a very unique parcel, I guess. I don't know if there's any such thing as a comparable piece of property. Would you just look at right-of-way values, for example, for CDOT right-of-way and try to compare similar areas? Or I'm just kind of trying to get a feel of, I've been in favor of putting up the whole triangle for sale for years, and that hasn't happened. So I'm just curious how we'd sell this portion of it.
If I may.
Sure.
Let me go with Administrator Simonson first, Paul.
For other FEMA acquisitions, it actually required 2 appraisals. And then we use the average of those is the guidelines we were giving on other acquired parcels by FEMA.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Paul.
That's what I was going to say as well.
Okay, that's fine. Any other questions? Okay, Trustee Caravas.
I've got a quick question. Look at the picture we have in our packet there. There's what I am assuming, Victoria or Paul, are our power lines. I'm assuming this pump station would be using our power. We'd once again we buy their power in this quarter, they'd be buying our power here. Is just one of those things again? Is that how that would work?
I don't.
Go ahead.
I don't know. I believe this is in our power area, but we haven't gotten that far. We're just in the initial stages of planning.
Further questions? Well, let's see how the concept progresses. And like I said, I think you can sense that there is support to move forward with the possibility. Let me put it that way. And I look forward to it, to be perfectly honest with you. Like I said, I think it's extremely important that we maintain our relationship with Longmont as we have in the past. It's been a wonderful relationship, and please pass that on to everybody who's relative, and thank you very much.
Mayor Angelo, if I may.
Yes, you may.
I think the direction we're looking for as staff is about what sort of property interest to pursue with Longmont, whether the board would like to see the property sold, whether you want us to plat this and dedicate it right away, as we kind of talked about, or whether we want to proceed with a utility easement. Because the question before staff right now is what sort of property interest to give Longmont to make this project happen.
Does the board of trustees feel that it had, because I don't, does the board of trustees feel at this time that it has a comprehensive understanding of the possibilities? And no, I don't think so. I think that this should be an action item and maybe a workshop for the next meeting, although I'm not a workshop fan. I think that this is an important enough issue that we get a complete understanding of our options. Mayor Pro Tem Browning?
Yeah, I mean, I assume because of what a pump station costs and this being put underground and everything, that whether it's ownership in fee simple or a long-term lease or a permanent easement across a right of way or whatever, that it's going to be a permanent dedication of this area for this purpose. And to me, there's no big difference between that. It's going to, the area above it that needs to be accessible is not going to be usable by us or the fire district or anybody else. So if one type or another fits the grant application better, I don't really see a material difference between the types. If it's going to be for in perpetuity or 99 years or something like that, I'm not sure that it matters that much to us.
Trustee Lowell.
Well, you make a good point, Mayor Pro Tem Browning, but you also mentioned earlier that you had long advocated selling off surplus town property, including that triangle. And I just wonder if you start slicing that parcel up, if it devalues the future sale of the rest of it. So I think we have to explore it carefully.
Yeah, I mean, but again, whatever form it takes, you're going to subtract that portion of the value from that property anyway, because you're not going to be able to sell it. So to me, getting something for that little portion is probably better than nothing. And the rest of it, people keep telling me is unusable anyway. So we provide free parking to the fire district permanently. So we might as well get something for our the little corner of it there. That's the way I look at it. And to me, whatever fits the grant best, because I'll say, I presume that the water that we're getting more resilient on here, some of that ultimately comes back to Lions. So there's this indirect benefit to Lions, correct? Am I understanding that right? That the plant supplies water ultimately to Lions. So Lions has some benefit from this, and whatever form that ownership takes, it's not going to make any difference because it's going to be permanently off limits to everybody else. So whatever fits your grant best would be my suggestion.
So how would we like to proceed? Mayor, excuse me, Administrator Simonson.
Our next workshop right now is already full with mid-year budget and COVID budget plans. Would the board be comfortable if we discuss with the attorney the best of those scenarios and just bring it forth as a presentation of the options and why we chose what we did?
Along with Mayor Pro Tem Browning's suggestion about what fits the FEMA
Sure.
line. So you're going to have to communicate with Longmont on it also.
Yeah,
but
we've started those discussions. FEMA prefers them to own the parcel versus lease.
Okay.
Or a right of way.
Yeah.
A right of way dedication.
Okay, I think it's okay to bring forth, as expeditiously as possible our strategy.
Okay.
Madam Administrator and Planner Glasswell. Is that acceptable with the representatives from Longmont? You're welcome, sir. Is that acceptable with the rest of the board?
Yes.
Okay. All right, you have your direction, Madam Administrator. Thank you very much. Discussion on parks entry fee policy per Trustee Caravas.
All I was asking for was a agenda discussion item if the board wanted to hear it based on what's happened in the park. And then originally, I'll give kudos to Trustee Miller. She called this the first year we opened Vern Johnson Park. That can we charge a fee because it was overcrowded on the weekends? It was a mess, and of course we were told we couldn't because we accepted FEMA monies, and a lot of things have changed since then. So I was just asking for if the board wants to make it a true item to discuss, if we ask town staff to over the next year or two to get with FEMA and look for loosening of their rigid playbook that they obviously worked with us with the buyout properties on leasing for parks or leasing for neighbors' use. I see the staff put a bunch of stuff in our packet concerning this, which is nice. And Laverne Johnson Park with a one way in, one way out is suitable compared to some of the other problems that Denver and the information in the packet said towns would have. But the vandalism that's occurring, the overuse, and the emergency meetings we've had to have just concerning a park is wasting a lot of time and money of our staff and, in our budget. So I was just looking to see if our board is willing to travel down the road to see if we can get staff, if staff wants to look at, see if we can make some changes. And if not, can we make changes to the park? Like, as I've been walking through it almost every day with the dog that demands to lay in the river. And if I don't take him there, I get in trouble. The part of the park that's closed with the green gate, if that permanently stays closed and those parking stalls become additional camp sites, where you park next to your camping site to increase our funds. And if we add more, if the sewer capacity allows for 3, 4, 5 more RV parking to the Dover County Park to hopefully cover up our losses of parking revenues if we have to keep doing this every year now as society has changed and things have changed.
I'd be happy to make a couple comments if you'd like.
Yes, sir.
So provided you with a little information in your packet just to show, that this is something that many communities are facing as they see increased use, increased impacts, and obviously budgets become tighter. I think what it'll become a question of, and I'll have to get with Brandon on this, we weren't able to touch base. And I did try to dig up. This isn't the first time that we faced this question. Previous boards have wanted to address it. The previous town attorney actually did write a memo on this, and I was not able to find it. That there are multiple variables that play into this. One of them is how the parks have been funded in the past, and do we have any grant agreements that would restrict the use of an actual entry fee? I think what you find today as a trend for a lot of different park entities, especially municipalities, is that they've found it palatable and that it is reasonable to charge fees for specific uses. So for people that are going to have a specialized use in the park, whether it be athletic teams or somebody renting a specific facility for a specific use, that charging people fees for those specialized uses is a reasonable fee or a reasonable way to charge people fees for uses of municipal parks. Charging an entry fee for anybody that would enter a public park gets a little more tricky because then it becomes a matter of equity. So, for instance, in Lions, when we have this discussion, would we be charging Lions residents a fee to enter the park? And only people that are from outside of Lions would have to pay this fee? Because then you get into a question, I believe the way we talked about it previously from an attorney standpoint is, well, people might say, well, I pay sales tax to your town, or you use Boulder County property taxes, but I don't live in town. So you might get challenged at some point on that. But to charge them for parking as a convenience, that is reasonable because they're parking, you're charging them parking. To charge them to rent a shelter, that's a specified use. They're reserving it. They have exclusive use of that shelter for a period of time. To charge for camping, that's a reasonable fee. All of those fees that we implement. To charge a large group fee for groups over 30, those are all reasonable fees. But when you start to implement entry fees just to use the park to enter it, that gets a little more tricky.
Would you be palatable to looking at adding to those fees of those individual picnic tables people take over with 30, 40 people, that we start having to reserve those and lease those out and maybe add a couple more in the open, some few of the open areas that seem to be getting covered with tents and other things that are killing our grass, hitting our sprinkler heads, and doing the same thing. Thus, pretty much divvying the park up so its footprint is smaller of just space sitting there, and we put more campsites, we put more picnic tables, and we charge those fees and higher fees, or even higher. I've spoken to some other board members that the double, tripling, quadrupling the deposit for the shelters. And as soon as you have more people, especially in COVID, as soon as you have one person over what that thing says you're allowed to have, and our Trident or you or Seth can just take pictures, like, oh, you're over 2 people, you just lost your deposit. Because the parks are taking a beating, which you are aware of. Staff brought that to our attention. You guys did a couple of weeks ago. We tried, and we got answers of why we didn't do our reservation thing, but maybe we can, work on that on the off season. But I don't see this going away at all.
No, certainly. I think that's part of what staff does during each budget season. I think we do have to look at those and try to be commensurate with, the fees that are being charged throughout the region at our neighboring parks, specifically when it comes to camping, but also with reserving of shelters. And, some of this was explored during our flood recovery planning process for parks. One of the next things that probably needs to be looked at is, in parks, do we start to look at reserving of picnic areas or spaces? We just talked about this as staff last week with Bone Park coming online more fully. What about the picnic areas around the shelters or the restrooms? And how do we reserve those, and at what sizes? How do we get back to implementing more successfully some of the special use or, large group permits, and how do we enforce those more successfully? So I know those conversations are coming, but yes, I think every year the fee schedule that's presented to the board as part of the budget process needs to be reviewed carefully. And we need to look at ways to not only implement fees to offset the costs of the impacts for operations and maintenance, but also to help us enforce those things that we know are difficult to enforce in our parks, including overcrowding.
And I personally don't have a problem, as I've been studying the economics of different parts of the country in camping, which is something I don't do that much anymore, really haven't done in decades. But certain parts of this country, if you wanted to buy a boat, you can't find a boat. You want to buy a camper or an RV, you can't get one. You want an above ground pool, you can't get one because COVID, people are staying home and they're finding other things to do. And if we become one of the more expensive places to camp an RV or put a camper in an RV, yeah, we're going to push some people away. But we have a private park that's closed right now, and it's a better experience, because what do you do as a staff if we would have kept those parks open? Those people are running all over the place in huge parties, and we got amplified music, which isn't supposed to be going on. There are people smoking marijuana they aren't supposed to be doing in those parks. I'd see it every time I'd go in there. We start to get bad reviews from those campers that camp here with their RVs and the tent sites. With the internet these days, you don't recover from that very quickly. That's going to be out there forever, and that hurts us. So doing what we did, I believe Trustee Waugh's statement in his trustee report, some businesses aren't liking it. But if we add more stalls and more camping spots, and I'm not talking one or two, I'm talking quite a bit, and revamping the park, which will take some capital, I think we create a better experience, because I sure don't want to sit there and see all this work you guys have done as a staff, and we start to get some bad reviews because this Vernon Johnson Park is so overrun all the time on weekends that people stop coming. So I'm just curious what the rest of my board members feel, if it's worth delving into. Because I would like to see more security in the park. I know we've talked since I became on the board when we looked at approve the phase 2 or final phases of that park, that we were told there'd be cameras, and it turned out, well, we have infrastructure for it, we don't have anything up there yet. Probably something the board needs to look at, and we need to get cameras in that park looking at every door that someone's coming out of. So if we know vandalism occurred between 1 and 4 p.m., we give information to the sheriffs, and they can decide who looks guilty coming out of the park, and we start questioning, looking at license numbers if we have to.
Trustee Lowell.
I looked at this subject, it says discussion on parks entry fee policy. Correct me if I'm wrong. Can we or can we not charge a gate fee for people entering that park, given the funding that those parks were built with?
Counselor.
So I was not able to locate the previous memo from the previous town attorneys. I looked through the files I was given through them, so I've not had a chance to review that, but it's my understanding that an opinion was rendered saying that we might not be able to, but I have not seen that opinion. I looked through it when I became aware of it later last week. So until I read that, I can't say definitively whether it's a yes or no answer.
Because, you know, I'm operating under the assumption that we cannot charge a gate fee, that the only thing we can charge is a parking fee. And that comes from the experience in Lyon, not only experience in Lyons, but also in another park where I was on the Parks and Rec Commission, having the exact same problem we're having here in Lyons. They're getting a lot of out-of-state people crowding the park, and the suggestion was made, we need to charge them a fee at the gate, and we were told, sorry, you can't do that. It was built with Fed money. You have to treat everybody equitably. So, by the way, I'm all in favor of everything that that Dave and Trustee Caravis have mentioned. I think we need to look at those fees. We need to increase them. We need to increase the opportunity for the fees. I just want to be absolutely clear on that entry fee, whether that's possible or not.
Trustee Rogan.
I think this is great timing to take a look at this with the park closures. I think closing the parks was the right thing to do. I have to say I was a little disheartened. I was walking, my Chihuahua has to go in the river every day too, or else I hear about it. And I was disheartened to see people opening the gate, driving in, parking, hanging out, even though the sign says it's closed. There was nobody paying any attention. So, you know, I certainly wasn't going to say anything to anybody doing that because you never know. So I'm afraid that word might get out that, hey, they say the parks are closed, but you know what? You can just open the gate and go in, drive right in, no problem. I'm a little bit concerned about the equity issue. You know, a lot of folks without a lot of money come to the parks to be able to enjoy their families. And if we start charging for every picnic table and we start charging a lot for every picnic table, that really disproportionately affects people who are not financially well off. And so I would like to try to find a way to mitigate that. Maybe we sell discounted entry passes to families. I don't know what, but I'd like to take that into consideration when we look at this further.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a comment? Mayor Pro Tem Browning.
I'd like to echo what Trustee Lowell said. I haven't seen that. Maybe this was addressed in the prior law firm's memo, but we've been told, or I've heard over and over and over, that we can't charge an entry fee. And I agree with Trustee Rogan. We'd have to be careful what we charged and not, you know, make it a park for rich people only and that type of thing. But I'd like to see the basis for that. Is it a federal regulation, a provision in a federal grant agreement, a federal statute? What is it exactly? I've never seen the actual document that says why we can or can't charge an entry fee, and if we can, what amounts. I mean, one of the articles that was attached was about San Francisco charging a bunch of entry fees to its park school. Maybe they weren't federally funded or something, but how did they do that? Is that even an option for us? I'd like to see the actual document, and maybe that was addressed in that prior law firm memo, but I'd like to, that's a starting point for me, and I'd like to see where it comes from.
David.
Yes, again, I can't recall either. So I do think it's going to take some background. And I don't know as if it was definitive. I think that it might have just stated that we needed to check our grant agreements. I can tell you that a lot of our parkland was either purchased with Land and Water Conservation Fund money or state Great Outdoors Colorado money. And so, again, I think I don't know if it was a definitive answer or if it was just a warning that we could be challenged on this, especially if you're charging an entry fee. And again, there's a difference between charging a fee for specialized use within a park, like you were seeing in some of my articles. And I think that's where municipalities were leaning. They're saying, look, you can charge somebody for a specialized use. And in essence, you know, our parking fee, we are generating quite a bit of revenue off these fees if we can do it. And again, with our enforcement or our difficulty with enforcement on some of these levels, to charge an entry fee is quite a challenging thing to do. Parks tend to be very porous. If you look at even with our closures right now, even in Laverne Johnson, which has 1 point of entry, people float down from Apple Valley. They're coming in through Riverbend. They're coming in through River Cliff. What do? Are we going to put a wristband on them and have somebody walk around and said, you paid, you paid, you paid, you didn't pay? We're going to have the challenge of are we going to not charge town residents and only charge people from outside of town limits? How are we going to define town residents? All of these things become challenging. So I guess I would defer, and I think we're going to have a talk as staff and with the town attorney, and then again with the town board. Maybe this is a good workshop item. But how would we do something like that successfully? And are we better suited to just review the fees we do charge? And are there other ways that we can derive additional revenue that might be better?
And that's great. And that was my original question: is to whom the funding was granted to us from? Is great. Can we ask for an exception if it was Conservation Trust Fund? Well, you go to them with the problem. Like I said, it may take a year or two to slowly work through this, as you said, as we go through this through the fall of 2020, the spring and summer of 2021, and maybe a couple of years, 3-year issue. But when someone says you can't do it, I personally take that as a challenge to go, well, yeah, well, we'll see. Maybe I can. It's worked out well for me. It's allowed me to retire young and move here, which is nice. So I kind of take that as a challenge. So if FEMA or GOCO or someone says, no, you can't. Well, you know what? Let's open up the discussion, talk about it. And just like you said, let's bat it around. If it takes 2 years to bat around, hopefully we can keep things piecemeal together over that time and do, come up with a solution. But I hate to see a beautiful park being overrun and being destroyed like it is. Trees and bushes trampled, grass being smashed. You can't even turn the sprinklers on enough times to keep the grass watering so the root structure can stay alive with just the amount of people on it. So I just hate to see that happen. So that's all. This is a discussion. Is what my intentions are.
Any further comments? I'll make one. You know how long this has been going on? For about 24 years, David. You know that as well as I do. We were told many, many times. And that was when it was GOCO money. It wasn't even federal money. I'm not convinced. And like Trustee Karavis said, we can research it, but I'm not convinced that we can charge an entry fee, nor am I a proponent of what I would consider along the lines of what Trustee Rogan said, a regressive fee. People without means, that's going to hurt more than who just want to enjoy the outdoors with their families, much more than somebody who, I don't know what we're thinking about, $2, $3, $4, I don't know, could impact. So I would rather analyze how much we're making off of the services that we can provide, that we can charge for. And I wouldn't be in favor of an entry fee. I'm sorry. But we'll decide that, I guess, in the future. I think probably we should get another determination on whether we can or not. I think that would be, I think that would be prudent. I think I know the answer, but I could be wrong. Like I said, we've been dealing with this for over 20 years. So, you know, I think if we thought we could charge it, we would have, and we haven't. But we implemented parking, we implemented the rental of the buildings, we implemented RVs, you know, so they're generating a substantial amount of money. So, I mean, is that okay with the board to research whether we can or not? And to give us a definitive answer, Brandon, could you please pursue that?
We can certainly look into it. I don't know if the answer is going to be definitive. It's probably going to be another one of those, well, you can, but here are the conditions type of answer, which I think is what you're likely going to find. As I've been talking about this, I just remember that, you know, City of Lakewood has Bear Creek Lake Park, which has an entry fee, but it's for vehicular entry. It's not for all comers. And so, of course, I'd be happy to look at it. I don't work off the previous legal research that has been done. So that way we're not reinventing the wheel here, but happy to do so.
Is that okay with the rest of the board? Okay. We have a consensus of the board. You go ahead. All right. Discussion of future agenda items. What do we have that we would like to discuss? Town Clerk Vasquez?
The only one I've gotten so far is from Mayor Pro Tem Browning, water portfolio discussion.
Anything else? Depending on if you have that information available by our next meeting, Brandon, you could give us a legal update on that,
I'll try my best.
on the parks issue?
Yep.
Okay. Anything else? Trustee Miller?
I'd like to try and come up with some sort of parking plan, some sort of residential parking plan for this town. I had a discussion, I've had a couple of discussions actually lately, and I think it's really time that we look into that.
Okay. Anything else? Summary of action items, Madam Clerk?
Okay, I've got, we need to address audience comments from Keith Roussel at 194 2nd Avenue. Trustee Carvis would like a list of USDA loan recipients, if they had multiple loans issued and if they have defaulted. Trustee Carvis would like a timeline of grants applied for to cover the $400,000 for the PED Bridge. An accounting of every connection with a water share from Mayor Pro Tem Browning. Paul Glasgow is going to work on the City of Longmont pump station options. And also we're going to follow up on the parks entry fee.
Thank you. Madam Administrator, do you have any additions?
The items that we need to follow up in regard to the minor encroachment, that'll be on the next board meeting. Ian Brighton regarding the ADA and ABA, follow up on that curb. And the Citizen Budget Committee maybe put out some kind of a e-blast requesting members. And then the fire department, have them contact Leaf and let them know they should talk with them. I do want to let you know Lori Barton just felt terrible about missing the meeting. She's been texting me. She did not know where to find the Zoom link, so I apologized for that and told her we'll probably put her on as a general business item next time so she can make her request. And I think I think that is about it.
Have her contact the fire department, not the other way around.
No, I will. I did tell you.
Because they have the facility and they're willing to do it. They have the room. So if that could happen, that would be great. Are we done? As you can tell, my voice is about ready to go out. So Trustee Browning will read the executive session language, please. And I appreciate it, sir.
I think we need a motion first, Mayor. So I will move to enter into executive session pursuant to CRS sections 24-6-4024E and 24-6-4024B for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and instructing negotiators, and for legal advice from attorneys representing the town concerning the transfer and potential conditions on the transfer of the town's cable franchise with Lions Communications LLC. And
I'm sorry, will we get a new Zoom link for this executive
Yes, I'll
session?
send it as soon as I stop recording this. I'll email it right off.
let me ask Attorney Dittman, should I also move for the second one, or do we have to do that separately?
Sorry, I was muted. We'll have to do that separately.
Okay.
At the conclusion of the first executive session, we'll come into regular session, start the second one. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
You're going to send that to us on the town email, town clerk?
Sorry, who was the second?
I'll second that.
Do you want me to call for the vote, sir?
Yes, go ahead.
Mayor Angelo?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Browning?
Aye.
Trustee Caravas?
Aye.
Trustee Lowell?
Aye.
Trustee Miller?
Yay.
And Trustee Robin?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. You'll send us the link on the email?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Request a 5-minute break.
okay, you got it.